Hello and welcome to the 2021 Symposium presented by the Canadian Safe Boating Council. My name is Ted Rankin, for those of you who know me, and my name is Ted Rankin for those of you who don't know me. John Gullick normally is our MC. I was asked to fill in because John unfortunately has a family emergency. It's not a significant one, so certainly don't get too worried about him. But he asked if I would help out, so I'm crossing my fingers and hoping I'm able to do this in as a professional way as John has always done it. It's been a really interesting summer out there on the water. The number of new boaters out there, it's incredible. We were doing overflights, checking out life jackets and life jacket wear, and the number of boats out there. It's just heartening to see so many Canadians out enjoying what Canada has to offer. It's been a great summer on the water, and it's also part of the reason that we're having this symposium is because there are so many boaters out there, and obviously the theme this year is how can we help them all. I'd like to introduce Joe, who is going to kick off the session. Joe's chairman of the Canadian Safe Boating Council and is going to offer some greetings to you all.
Thank you, Ted. I too would like to welcome all of you here today to the second virtual symposium hosted by the Canadian Safe Boating Council. Special thanks to CSBC Director Lawrence Jacobs for leading the team that has put this together for you today. And a special note that the technical challenges are being handled by RSO Media and PlaySafe Productions. Although they told me earlier that they didn't want you to know that in case things didn't go well, but I'm sure it will. Although it would have been nice to be in Mont-Tremblant, we'll just have to wait another year. There are a lot of people here today that have joined us that might not have been able to be with us in person. I thank you for your participation. The programs of CSBC are not possible without sponsorship, and our presenting sponsor today is Stearns Coleman, and we appreciate all that you have done to help the CSBC get our safe and responsible boating messages out throughout Canada. I'd also like to thank Stearns for the amount of DFDs that they donate to our Northern Youth programs. These donations make a difference in the lives of many in the North. And also thank you to the Port of Vancouver for their sponsorship today. I know you will enjoy the program. Welcome to new boaters. How can we help?
So before we kick it off and I bring Joe back on, there's a few housekeeping duties that I'd like to take care of. Some of them is pretty easy. I mean, we're not in a room, so you all know where the emergency exits are. You all know where your bathrooms are and things like that. And speaking of bathrooms, there will be a health break partway through, so check your agenda to find the timing of that. But one of the housekeeping questions I would like to bring forward is if you have questions of our presenters, if you could just simply use the chat window and you can ask the questions as the presenter is presenting. You'll see on the agenda that we actually have opportunities for those questions to be handled, and they will be at the end of the presentations where we've indicated questions. So just simply use that chat window and we'll be able to pose those questions that you have to the presenters. If we get a lot of questions and we can't get to them all, we will email you back with those with the answers. So first up is I'm going to bring Joe back in a moment. Joe is a financial person by profession. He's spent most of his career as a financial controller of a commercial and industrial contractor in Windsor, Ontario. Independent of his professional life, though, Joe has spent most of his time, his entire life on the water, boating since a very young age. He made boating education a priority in his life about 30 years ago when he began instructing for CPS ECP, the Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons. And he has been everywhere in every position with CPS ECP, including past chair of the board, serving as chief commander. Joe currently stays actively involved with CPS ECP as the local education officer. He's also Transport Canada's National Recreation Boating Advisory Committee. He's on the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators in the States. The list goes on. National Safe Boating Council, U.S. Power Squadrons, and of course, for us, he's here as our chairman of the Canadian Safe Boating Council, and Joe's going to set the tune for today's symposium.
Thanks, Ted. Again, new boaters. I won't get into this very much because this one is very self-explanatory. I'd like to sort of introduce this segment with a real experience here in Ontario on Lake Simcoe. First time on the water in a canoe. You have to understand that this is an actual 911 call.
We received a call from 3 frantic girls that had rented a canoe. It was their very first time in a canoe. None of these girls could swim, and they got in the canoe and started paddling around in a small bay. Unfortunately, they were not aware of the dangers associated to weather. The weather that day was 21 kilometer per hour sustained winds and 42 kilometer per hour wind gusts south, which essentially meant that they were being blown directly offshore.
911, do you require police, fire, ambulance?
I don't know. We're stuck in the middle of the river. We don't know what to do. We're in a kayak and we don't know how to swim. And
okay, hold on. Where are you? What water are you in?
Don't know.
What water? I can't hear you. Is it
Lake Simcoe?
You're in Lake Simcoe? It's very hard to hear you.
Due to the fact that they were inexperienced and didn't know how to properly paddle, they were unable to paddle against the wind and found themselves in a bit of a jackpot.
We are close. Just a second. We are close to Seagull Point.
So you're near Sybil Point Provincial Park?
Yes. We
Okay.
came for events.
How far out in the water are you?
It's very far. We're trying to go for
You can't.
Okay.
Okay, just take a deep breath. You're doing very good.
Okay.
They're already coming.
At one point, the female that was the caller, the frantic caller, mentioned Sybil Point Provincial Park. That is a location very close to our marina. I responded to that call towards Sybil's Point. I was going to do a very large loop, which would put me into a good search grid pattern, keeping in mind the wind conditions that day. At which point that female then stated that she saw a large white boat. Due to the fact it was a weekday, there was no other boats out there. I figured that that was going to be me. So what I did was I made obvious and abrupt turns and received, I was trying to elicit a response from this girl, and I received a positive impact, and she was able to say that boat is now turning. So I knew that it was me. I continued to turn until that female stated that the boat was coming directly to them. I was very close to them before I could actually spot them, and in fact, thankfully they were wearing a life jacket that was bright colors, because that's the only thing I saw. I didn't even see the canoe. I had to get very close to them before that I could actually see them. So we were very happy that we were able to find these girls. However, I don't think these girls will ever step foot off of solid land again. And it's unfortunate because here in Ontario we have some of the most beautiful lakes, and it's a Canadian recreation. But you have to respect it. If you're going to be out in the water, you have to respect it. You have to take the safety precautions. And swimming is not just something for recreation. It's a life skill. It's something that you need to know how to do. And if you are not a strong swimmer, I was happy to see that they were wearing a PFD, because if that canoe had gone over, at least they would have stayed afloat.
We're going to first time canoeing.
First time canoeing.
Yes.
Okay, is this going to be your last time canoeing?
Yes.
Yeah.
This certainly tells one story. One example of a likely of hundreds across our country with respect to new boater experience. As Ted mentioned earlier, I am the educational officer locally as my primary role in CPS ECP. This gives me a front row seat to new boaters, and this past winter, I had the real privilege of meeting Sean, Julie, Jimmy, and Dolores. The call came in. We need to take the course that I was starting that night. They needed to be in it. They had become what we refer to as COVID boaters in the late summer of 2020, and now realized more clearly what they had gotten into. Fortunately, both couples did not run into serious trouble in their introductory times on the water, but they did have a number of close calls. They, however, did discover that there was a lot to learn to feel more comfortable with their new boating lifestyle. Going into boating, they just did not know what they did not know. Let's hear from Sean, Julie, Jimmy, and Dolores for a few minutes.
And all of a sudden it went from 3.5 to 2 feet. I says, oh my God.
And it's black, literally black on the water.
You can't just get on a boat and drive.
The next thing I know, they're going to run into us. Oh my God.
As soon as we hit the marina here, the storm decided to wipe us out.
We really needed to learn a lot more than what we took in our license. I personally never wanted to have a boat, but Sean did, and when things opened up, he said, hey, how about we just go and look at some boats? I said, okay, so we looked at a couple boats at a place that was selling boats.
We were debating on whether to get a cottage or a trailer, and I always like to be near the water, and I thought, geez, a cottage, you have to drive, quite a ways to get to the cottage, and as far as a trailer, I wanted one near the water, and so this is kind of the best of both worlds because we have a trailer on the water now. We can come and don't even take the boat out sometimes.
Our decision to buy a boat came from, it's the times of the COVID. We're, so secluded at home, and it had a lot to do with our ability to have vacation. I work every other weekend. Getting away is hard.
One of the key decisions for me to buy this boat was that Paul from Happy Days was going to spend a whole day with us teaching me how to tie ropes, how to back it in, how to park, and how to do a lot of things, because otherwise I would never bought this boat, because the first thing about parking or how to slow down.
We got this 33-foot Wellcraft from a gentleman in Sarnia, and we started to enjoy our journey of boating.
A friend of ours bought a boat and kind of wanted us to go look at a boat, and that option kind of attracted us. We bought a 24 Bayliner Sierra.
Under the instruction of the gentleman who sold us the boat, he said, oh yeah, you guys can just drive it all the way to Windsor. First time boaters, never on the water. A little bit nervous about it. We ended up doing our boating license, and realizing how much we didn't know. We were lucky enough to have our daughter who's in the Navy and her boyfriend who's in the Navy to join us. And thank God we did, because they taught us a lot about boating, how to be safe on the water. But at that point, we realized we really needed to learn a lot more than what we took in our license.
So once we were trained a little bit from Paul, we decided to take the family out the next day to Crystal Bay. As soon as we got out to the open, we started going out there, and I see these red and green buoys, which I was never really taught yet about this. So we just tried to stay in the middle, I guess, between the two.
We were able to experience Crystal Bay and learning how to anchor. Thanks to our daughter and her boyfriend, they taught us all of that. Otherwise, we would have just been on our own.
We headed towards Crystal Bay from our navigational chart on our Garmin, because I don't know either way to go, how to even get there without that help. But since we got there, we saw there was like hundreds of boats just tied up, and we tried to navigate in between these places, and we finally found a little place to get in there. We threw our anchor down and then decided to spend the day there, and then next thing I knew, our anchor didn't hold. We were drifting into these other boats, and I said, oh my God, so that stopped quickly. So we had to go and start the motor right away while Dolores had to grab the anchor and resettle it. So once we did that part, we kind of was good for the next couple of hours. But then these other boats were starting to come in closer to us, as the day got filled. And then all of a sudden, this other boat, next thing I know, they're going to run into us. Oh my God, this doesn't stop. We have to be vigilant all the time. We had to be awake, and you couldn't even enjoy the day. We had to even push the boat away from us from crashing.
We had an incident where my wife and I were trying to communicate, and she had I was coming in, but I didn't feel quite right about coming in the way I was lining my boat up, and she had stepped off the dock already with the rope, and I had decided to go back out again because I wasn't lined up. And that was a little harrowing of an experience, because now I'm on the boat and she's on the dock, and we have to get this boat in and no ropes. And so we had my daughter and her friend on the boat, luckily, with us, and she wound up throwing the rope. And then we had the issue of, you know, possibly the rope going into the propeller, and we wound up getting the rope properly situated. And we managed to get ourselves in. So it's little things like that that we learned, that you can't take things for granted.
Our last experience that was kind of traumatic for us was a nighttime boating. We were late getting to Cali and Lazell. We're from Tecumseh, and we had to take the boat out. It was the last day of the season. Instead of getting there at 5:30, we got there at 6:30, and it got dark quick. So we got onto the water, and we could see all the sailboats out. It was so beautiful. And next thing you know it, we passed the sailboats, and it's 7:30, and it's jet black outside, and we're taking the boat out of Ranta. And we have this little tiny light on the boat that has to reflect a buoy out there somewhere, and we did, and it was helped guide us in. But as we were coming in, we had called Julie and Sean, our friend of ours, because the wind picked up, and even that was stressful. And it's black, literally black on the water. And we finally, they were there, and we finally got the boat in, and we finally got it up on the ramp.
So from all the experiences we had with our first year of boating, the good with, you know, obviously needing to learn a lot more, people had explained to us that there's actual boating courses out there. So I always thought it was like captain's courses, and we're like, well, we don't need to take a captain's course. But obviously we learned that there's many courses to take. The last course that we took was a radio course. That was interesting because we realized through that course that we didn't even have an option of pushing the emergency button because we didn't even have it registered.
What also we've learned too is that just there's so many interesting things about some of the courses we've taken that I didn't realize that now makes us feel more comfortable to travel outside of our general area. We feel more comfortable venturing out further now because we know how to read maps. We know what compass points to look at and directions to follow in. And now we're able to really fully enjoy our boating experience more, and actually enjoy our company more on the boat now, instead of you know, some of the arguments or disputes that we would have over little things. Now we are really thoroughly enjoying our boat. And what's interesting is now we find ourselves imparting knowledge on other boaters now already.
And it's a lot of eye openers when you're taking these courses, because you're like, oh, well, we had the radio on and we didn't have a license for it, and we didn't even know how to talk on it. All those things, backup things that you don't always think about, we have them on the boat now. And so all those things make us feel more comfortable.
You know, we got to really enjoy the water and being out on our boat, and, you know, having people aboard and the social aspect of it.
There's so much to learn, and keep going with our education so that we feel more comfortable in these situations.
That's what I want to say to all new boaters, is that because we have so many new boaters now, given the circumstance especially that we've been through the last couple of years with COVID, that enjoy boating, but get yourself educated.
They really relate that more education and experience was a key answer. Getting to know the four of them, I can attest to the fact that they did have a much better summer this year, and they give credit to education. But I give them credit for reaching out, learning, and still wanting to learn more. You just do not get in a boat, I give them credit for reaching out, learning, and still wanting to learn more, but you just do not get in a boat and, as was stated, take it down the river to Windsor. I'd like to thank the four of them for sharing with us today, and to Jim Atkinson for all of the footage taken. But the question still remains as to how do we reach these new boaters and show them the easy way before they find out the possibly tragic hard way. Ted?
Thanks, Joe. That was a very good presentation and very enlightening. And unfortunately, the on the first video, those young women won't be going boating again. So that's another byproduct of not helping new boaters. So it gives you an idea of sort of what is happening out on the water from the boater experience. And the next up is going to be a two-part presentation, which is what are we seeing on the water? And this is from the police side as well. We're going to start off with a speaker who comes from the coast, Sergeant Rod Pick. Sergeant Rod Pick is the operations commander of West Coast Marine Services, the RCMP. Rod's got 28 years service in the RCMP and arrived at WCMS in 2016. Sergeant Pick has a variety of policing experience in the marine environment, having spent his entire career on the West Coast. WCMS is a provincially funded full-time marine unit that assists 45 RCMP and several municipal detachments on the West Coast. So we'll turn it over to Sergeant Rod Pick and hear from him what's happening out under his watch and on the coast.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry, I'm just some problems here. First slide, please. Okay, my name is Sergeant Rod Pick. I'm with the RCMP on the West Coast here. I've been with the RCMP for 28 years, and I am currently with West Coast Marine Services. I've spent my entire time in the RCMP on Vancouver Island, up and down several different postings. Next slide. We have several patrol vessels in our. There's several patrol vessels in our fleet. We patrol from the Alaskan border to the north and both sides of Vancouver Island, as well as Haida Gwaii. We assist 45 RCMP detachments and municipal police forces such as Victoria and Saanich Police. We have several patrol vessels. One is the Lindsay, which is one of 3 patrol vessels. The other 2 are the Inkster and the Higgett, named after the previous commissioners in the RCMP. The Lindsay, for example, is an 18-meter catamaran built in 1992. Our unit partakes in joint patrols with other partners such as Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Transport Canada, Canada Border Services Agency, such as this patrol out of Bamfield on the west side of Vancouver Island. Crews live on these boats for 7 days in a row. We are self-sustainable, complete with satellite phones, fax machines, printers, internet connection, and can provide a floating detachment literally anywhere on the BC coast. The Ridgid hull inflatable boats, these are work boats that get used for all kinds of situations, such as everyday low-risk vessel checks to boarding vessels for high-risk situations, such as drug importation or illegal human trafficking. In remote communities with no police vehicles, we will often offload bikes or motorbikes for modes of transportation for our officers. Since January 1st, 2020, West Coast Marine has checked in excess of 900 vessels on the West Coast. These numbers are down somewhat due to COVID-19. However, during these vessel checks, compliance checks, our members will enforce various acts and regulations under the Canada Shipping Act and determine if the operator is sober, for example, if there's any illegal contraband on board, or any offenses that may be present, such as violations under the Fishery Act and or Firearms Act. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. And this is listed in no order of priority. The Canada Shipping Act authorizes enforcement officers to stop and board any vessels for the purpose of enforcing various marine-related acts. These acts include the Canada Shipping Act, small vessel regulations, competency of operators of pleasure craft regulations, vessel operator restriction regulations, and the collision regulations, for example. These rules can be defined, such as speed limits under the VORR. Many new boaters are unfamiliar with the many speed zones that have been identified in the VORR on the West Coast. The fine for speeding in BC in a designated area in the VORR in British Columbia is $230 that the police can enforce. Those areas that are not identified, such as marinas above, will have no wake signs. And of course, this is known as the proper etiquette, not to disturb the boaters that are tied up. New boaters, new mariners learn this type of etiquette over time. A collaborative approach between the RCMP, DFO, Canadian Coast Guard, Transport Canada, and Parks Canada that started in 2019. The first stage for compliance of the interim order, a provision under the Canada Shipping Act, was through education and outreach. However, police and DFO are now charging repeat offenders through a Transport Canada process called an AMP, which is an administrative monetary penalty. Safety equipment on a vessel falls under the Canada Shipping Act under the small vessel regulations. I decided to talk about the 3 deficiencies observed most by our West Coast Marine Services. And they are, in no particular order, but these are the things that we're finding. So one, for example, is the flashlight on the boat is not operating. A lot of people forget to check them and to put new batteries in every year. That's one thing that we are finding as a deficiency. And number 2 is expired flares, which are required on vessels 6 meters or greater in Canada. Of course, flares are due 4 years from manufacturing date. Number 3 is the insufficient number of PFDs or life jackets on board. Officers can use discretion and give warning tickets for any of these offenses that they find committing. However, our unit, West Coast Marine, have made it our unit policy to ticket for insufficient life jackets on board. This is inexcusable. Too many persons drown each year for not having a life jacket or PFD on board. The fine amount in British Columbia is $230 and plus $115 for each additional missing life jacket. Like I said before, flares are valid for 4 years from date of manufacture. One of the problems we're finding on the West Coast is the lack of companies that will take in expired flares for disposal. Therefore, many boaters are leaving these old flares on their boats. The third trend we see is boaters with a lack of navigational experience. Often new boaters are unable to understand tides and currents and often get themselves in trouble, such as this vessel that went aground in the Southern Gulf Islands. Most new boaters neglect to have paper charts on board in case their electronic navigation systems fail. Many new boaters also do not properly monitor incoming weather conditions that may be a hazard to navigation and cause for a bad day on the water. Often inexperienced boaters will be unfamiliar with their navigation systems and radar on board if they have them at all. These mariners will often get in trouble the first time fog rolls in or when they venture out at night. This is one of several fatal boat accidents in British Columbia this summer that our unit, West Coast Marine, attended. This accident occurred on Lake Okanagan in August, involving 2 rented Sea-Doos, personal watercraft. Currently, rental companies can rent out their boats to people who do not possess any competency, for example, your Pleasure Craft Operator Card, PCOCs. Both operators were inexperienced in operating these personal watercrafts that both of them have over 100 horsepower engines. Unfortunately, one operator died as a result of this impact. Most of our members on West Coast Marine are NASWA Level 1 or 2 trained, and NASWA stands for National Association of State Boating Law Administrators, a program developed by US Coast Guard. In Canada, all persons who operate a pleasure craft with any type of motor or personal watercraft other than rentals must carry proof of competency on board. Operators must also be able to produce a copy of the license on board under the small vessel regulations. Failure to provide either document can result in British Columbia in a $288 fine. Non-compliance of producing a PCOC and or copy of vessel license are a very common occurrence that our members are finding here on the West Coast among new boaters and are conducting these vessel compliance checks specifically with, like I said, the new boaters. In conclusion, the top 4 trends of the new boaters from a policing perspective on the West Coast are lack of knowledge of marine rules, regulations, and etiquette, lack of operable safety gear on board, lack of navigational experience, and finally, the lack of proof of operator competency and/or vessel licensing. So finally, I want to thank the Canadian Safe Boating Council for inviting me today, in specific to Lawrence Jacobs, to this year's annual symposium, and for everyone that called in today for their time. Thank you, and safe boating.
Great. Thank you very much, Rod. It was a great presentation. It's nice to get a perspective of what you are experiencing out there on the coast. We have a few questions, and while we've got some time here, I'm just going to, I'll check on my screen. So this one is directed to Sergeant Pick. So Rod, it's from Ian Gilson. Ian is a CSBC director, and the question that Ian poses to you, Rod, is do you feel we need increased or more beefed up regulations?
Sorry, can you repeat the question there?
Absolutely. The question is, do you feel that we need increased or more beefed up regulations?
I think, you know, having more police presence on the water would help. I think, you know, we don't have the, it's a big coast. It's on this side of the water. I can speak for BC anyways. We do have lots of lakes. We have lots of coastline here in BC that the RCMP is responsible for. And I think, you know, the regulations, there could be more for us to enforce, absolutely, on various different avenues for sure. But you know, we do have several acts that we can enforce under the Canada Shipping Act, and but there is some things that unfortunately, it's if there was more signage out there on the water, if there was more, then yes, definitely the police could get involved more with some of the enforcement. If the regulations were beefed up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question to Nick. The question is, if you could say one thing to new boaters, make one statement to new boaters before they go out on the water, what would it be?
Training, education, know how to navigate. It's not only having the security equipment on board, it's also knowing how to drive, operate the vessel, and what to do when something happens. So training, yeah. This is the thing I would tell them.
So do you think that based upon, it's probably to both of you. So Rod, we'll start with you, but based upon where we are with enforcement, and the need for training, do you think that we've got the right balance of promotion? Are we strong enough out there in promoting safe and responsible boating practices? Rod, to you.
I think, you know, it's unfortunate the system is the way it is. I mean, you think of what it takes for a teenager to get their driver's license compared to what it takes to get a boater to allow them to be on the water for the pleasure craft operator card. It's two different levels there. I think that there could be more regulations in place, perhaps, you know, a standard level, and then as they progress, a boater could get more and more competency of some sort of training. I think that would help definitely for allowing young new boaters with their experience on the water, you know. And if we could have some sort of different level of competency, I think that would help definitely for boaters.
Okay, so yeah. Nicholas, the same question to you.
Yes, I think there could be place for improvement for education, the education aspect of new boaters, or like I said in my presentation, even experienced boaters, because they seem to be maybe overconfident because they have experience and they also die on the water. So I think there's education on all aspects. And I'm honest, maybe law enforcement needs to be a little bit better on kind of navigation infractions, like the careless operation of a boat, maybe be more aggressive on this side of law enforcement. So, yep.
So I've got another question that has come up, and it's interesting because we're talking about provincial governments directing restaurant owners ensure diners produce vaccination proof. So we're talking, you know, proof of vaccination, and the question that comes, should the rental operators provide, I mean, should they look at providing suitable proof of competency? And if so, who pushes for that? Would that be TC, forces? Who would work to make, because we're seeing this quite often within the rental boat community, for sure, you know. What do you think we should be doing for that? And who should be pushing for it? Nicholas, maybe to you. I see both of you are going to want to jump in on this one, right?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know if I'm the right person to answer it. It's a little bit tricky on this one. I seriously don't know who has to do that. I don't know if you, Rod, had the same opinion.
No, for sure. I was just going to chime in there. You know, you think about, I always compare what we do on the water to what we do on land. That's what I've done when I've come into the West Coast Marine here on the BC coast. And it's just mind-boggling that you can go rent a boat and not have a license. You again, try comparing that with renting a vehicle on land. You need a license. You need to show proof of competency, and it's mind-boggling that you can go rent, like I said in my slide presentation, a personal watercraft with 100 horsepower. You can go rent that on Lake Okanagan and not have any PCOC of any sort. That, to me, I think the rental companies should, it should be regulated. They should require that PCOC at minimum to go and rent a vessel. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add up on that because the question was marinas and boat rental agencies. For marinas, I don't have an opinion on that, but for boat rental agencies, I absolutely agree with Rod. Yeah.
Okay. Great, guys. Also, you know, when you say the rental agencies, maybe a thought would be before you let the guest that's visiting your cottage or something hop aboard, you should make sure that they know what the heck they're doing, or make sure they got the right proof of competence as well. I mean, it becomes a personal responsibility for sure. So thank you both. This has been great to hear a perspective from Quebec and from the West Coast. Thank you very much. So we're going to move south of the border now. And the next person that we've got presentation is Vern Gifford from the United States. Vern's a longtime friend, has been chief of the Boating Safety Division of the U.S. Coast Guard headquarters since September 2017. Vern's responsible for the administration and coordination of the National Recreational Boating Safety NRBS program, whose mission is to minimize deaths, injuries, damage, and environmental impact from recreational vessels, while optimizing safety and, importantly, enjoyment of boating. Now, part of Vern's task includes managing a $130 million grant program, executing the NRBS strategy plan, serving as the designated federal officer to the National Boating Safety Advisory Committee, administering the casualty reporting system, developing standards for recreational boat and equipment manufacturers, administering boat manufacturer compliance. It's a big list, Vern. You're a busy guy. Maintaining the notification, which is the recall process concerning defects, and administering the NRBS education, state law enforcement, and undocumented vessel numbering programs. So Vern, give us some perspective on what you're seeing, what you're experiencing in the United States.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, Ted. I'll make sure we shorten the bio in the future. You can see that we don't spend a lot of budget, at least in my house, at making sure we have strong messaging. We just have the whiteboard that says hello to the Canadian Safe Boating Council, but it is my pleasure to be able to talk to you today. I have a PowerPoint presentation that goes through some specifics of what we saw last year. It pretty much reinforces what Sergeant Pick and Sergeant Voyer have both seen. Of course, any presentation in today's day and age has to show just how much facial hair we put on during COVID, and so that's where mine starts to. Again, it's a shame that we can't get to see each other. It's been over 2 years. We finally just had our first conference in the United States as a recreational boating safety community, where we were able to get together with NASBLA, the state BLAs, our boating law administrators who lead the programs in each of our 50 states and the territories in DC, and a lot of the stakeholders. So I just came back from that before I have the pleasure of talking to you. I just show the 5 Canadian provinces that I have not been lucky enough to go to. I thought I would be able to take New Brunswick off the bucket list, but this really is a hope that we can all get together again in the future. So again, what we saw in the United States pretty much mirrors what the other countries saw, especially Canada. We had 26% more accidents in 2020 than we had in 2019. We believe that most of this was because of far greater activity, boating activity. We also had a tremendous number of new boat owners, as I'll show. And then we also had some challenges, both on the education side and the enforcement side. Looking at accidents, we track all the accidents by year, and I looked at the most recent 10 here to show you where we were. But you see that 2020, despite what was generally a downward trend prior to, had an increase in 16% in overall accidents. So accidents for us are deaths, injuries, or damage-only accidents that cause more than $2,000 in damage. Our deaths, so it was slightly larger in 2020 than it was in 2011, 767. But again, what you saw was a general downward trend line that significantly spiked in 2020, and we'll go through some of the details on that. Specifically to summer months, we have a 23-year data set that I can easily access. And even though 1998, which had over 850 deaths compared to the 767 last year, you see that in the peak summer months, we actually exceeded the number of deaths for that year and for every year. The 2 lines you see, the red line was the trend line prior to the 2020 input. The purple line is what it looks like after the 2020 input. So we went to where the program had a pretty significant downward trend to where it almost had no downward trend. So last year was a pretty significant year. We have some tentative data for 2021 that shows it's closer to what we experienced in 2019 than 2020. And I think that's probably being seen worldwide. Recreational options here in the States and in many places were significantly less in 2020. I think as we start to resume something that's closer to what it was in 2019, we see that people aren't boating in quite the numbers they were, but it's hard for us to get specific data. This just looks at the number of deaths, both on the motorboat side and also on the paddlecraft side. And there was increases in both, but significantly more on the motorboat side. And so I'll look at just a couple of slides. First, this is the top 4 types of motorboats that we track. And you can see in almost every one of the 4, we had record high numbers for the 10 years I'm looking at. Open motorboats especially made a significant jump, but the pontoon boats and the PWCs also had numbers that weren't even close to what their previous highs were in this 10-year data set. The only type of boat where you had fewer deaths in 2020 compared to other years was cabin motorboats. And I think that that's a function of the fact that you're more protected in a cabin motorboat, obviously. And also typically they're more capable and they're operated by more experienced people. And so we didn't quite see the numbers there that we saw everywhere else. It's usually not cabin boats that are being rented or operated by inexperienced people. This looks at the paddlecraft side, and the thing that jumped out to me is in the first 5 years in the United States of this data set, you see that the number of kayak and canoe deaths were about the same or pretty close. And also that you had very few SUP or stand-up paddlecraft deaths. In the last 5 years, and especially last year, kayak deaths have significantly outpaced any other paddlecraft. And that's really an indication of the fact that kayaks have become just so much more popular than any other paddlecraft. So there was a significant jump in kayak deaths. Not so much on either the rowboat or the stand-up paddlecraft side and really on the canoe side. Everything else leveled off, but but kayaks clearly make the biggest numbers in terms of the types. And just for what it's worth, we don't define canoe, kayak, and stand-up paddlecraft in regulation, which we do for the other 4 types of motorboats that I went through in the previous slide, but we use ABYC, our American Boat and Yacht Council definitions of those, and we do track them in our accident statistics. Again, a number that I think is pretty similar in a lot of countries, which is most of the boating deaths are by drowning. Over the last 10 years, it ranges from between 70 and 80% of deaths. Last year it was 75, so it pretty much split what has been our historic range. And then the numbers of victims that aren't wearing life jackets of those that who drown, you can see that it's amazingly consistent. It never varies more than 3 percentage points. The lowest in 10 years has been 83%. The highest has been 86%. But that to me is just surprising consistency, unfortunately, in terms of what happens when it comes to deaths on the water. We wish people would wear life jackets. So we're doing some things to try to better understand the PFD problem and perhaps better than target interventions. One is to more fully understand the nature of drownings. And that is when someone drowns, what is the likelihood that a potential rescuer is nearby? The rationale being that if you have a rescuer nearby, you're more likely to save that person, even if they're in a less capable PFD. So that's one thing we want to look at. The other thing we want to look at is we do track alcohol use, but I think that those numbers, at least in the States, are lower. And I think the true impact of alcohol isn't necessarily reflected in the statistics that we get. The reason I say that is because if you look at what happens in terms of alcohol related deaths in vehicles, they typically are in the high 20%. At nighttime, in the States, they go higher than even 30%. That alcohol is involved. Usually one operator of a vehicle in a fatal accident has been using alcohol. Our statistics are much lower than that. So I really want to try to look at both PFD wear and what happens in drowning, and also how many of those victims are tested for alcohol to more fully understand that. And then we're always trying to do things that may encourage PFD wear. We're trying to work with the enforcement community to see if we can be a little more creative in how we enforce other regulations and see if it affects PFD wear. But those are all future desires. We find that analysis projects, whenever we undertake one, take a lot more time and effort than initially you go into it thinking they will. So we really have to spend our time and effort wisely. Just to basically reflect what both Sergeant Pick and Sergeant Voyer mentioned, which is the number of deaths and the number of accidents. I mistitled this slide and realized it only after I sent it along, but there were 7,200 vessels in the United States that were involved in our 5,200 accidents. So accidents include deaths, injuries, and the damage only. And you see that among that set of 7,000, the number of rental vessels significantly jumped. Now it still is less than non-rentals, but it was a 66% increase last year alone in the number of rental vessels. I think that reflects, number one, the growing popularity of boating and the fact that you're more likely to use a rental facility. We've got the Freedom Boat Club and the other shared ownership clubs. And I think that another thing it tells us is that we have to be clear with the states who document most of our accidents, how to better note when it is a rental. I think among the unknowns that you see in this data set too, a lot of those unknowns are more likely to be rentals. So again, there were a lot more rentals, and it was far more likely that if you were on a rental, you were going to be involved in an accident. We had another statistic that tracks the experience level of anyone who's involved in an accident. And it had a 50% increase in the number of people involved in accidents that had less than 100 hours experience. So again, very inexperienced boaters out on the water who were contributing to more accidents. This looks at the top 24 types of accidents that we record and the ones that jumped at a level greater than the increase in the actual accident rate itself. But you see that a lot of departure deaths we see, especially on rentals, where someone will leave the vessel and not understand the dynamic characteristics that they're entering. You know, they've got tides, they've got currents, and they get in trouble. And so big jump in that, big jump in sinkings. But again, it speaks to the lack of experience. Carbon monoxide, we had a slight jump in what had been a downward trend, although we attribute that more to just the nature of larger events happening. I think one in 2019 had 15 injured people, another one had 17. So, but in general, we see a downward decline. I only mention this because these deaths get significant attention in the United States. I think because they just surprise and usually they can sometimes strike the most vibrant among us. So we had a 21-year-old female college student who was a Division I athlete at the University of Cincinnati who was a victim. So I think it leaves behind grieving parents who just can't believe that this happened to their children. And so very high profile cases, and something we obviously wish we could better educate on. We don't have good denominator data, but what we do have is shown here. We try to track the number of deaths per registered vessels. You're required to be registered in the United States, basically if you have any motor of significance on the boat. And but we had impacts to registration during the COVID period. It was much harder for people to register vessels. So we didn't see a big increase in registered vessels, which we expected. But even without that increase, you can see the accident rate jump significantly. So what we try to do to capture activity data, we want that denominator that goes along with the numerator of accidents. Is we're looking for things that might tell us. We do survey the American boating public once every 5 to 6 years. When we did it last time, we knew that we had 85 million people who went boating, and that we had over 25 million boats. Of that, 12 million were registered, and the other 13 million were non-registered, usually in most cases kayaks. So we've got to get a little better about gauging activity in off years of the survey, which 2020 was. This just explains what we do. We generate 2 reports when we get these surveys. One looks at national demographics, the participation survey. The other one looks at, tries to actually get numbers of boat hours per state. So we're looking at 35,000 positive responses, and we send out 250,000 surveys. So it's a pretty significant effort. And I won't go through this in any detail given my time, but these are the questions that we ask of the recreational boating community. And you can see that they're all typically yes, no. The ones in red usually are ones we know what the answer can be, so we can give them a little more latitude in the answer they provide us. Same with the participation. You can find all of our information, including the statistics, on www.uscgboating.org. So we post this, we post the surveys, we post each of our accident.
He's got about 2 minutes left on his talk.
And so new boat owners, I'll just basically explain that we saw spikes in new boat ownership since I'm coming near my time. Education, I just wanted to explain to you that for us, for education, we don't have skill-based requirements similar to what Sergeant Pick and Sergeant Voyer pointed out. It's amazing how little is required of people who go out on boats in the United States. And for us, it's just knowledge-based, oftentimes just internet-based. Classroom courses we found were far more effective once we could start teaching them virtually, which is what we did. We hope to continue that. And then in enforcement, I will only make one note of this because I'm short on time, and that is to say, basically, if you're in the United States and you own a boat with an engine cutoff switch, you've got to wear a link. That started as of this year. We're issuing only warnings, and it's only the Coast Guard, the federal side, that does that. But I'll answer Joe Gatfield's question of, does this apply to Canadian vessels? And my answer to him when he asked that was nope, not if they're only temporarily operating in the United States waters. So, but I appreciate that question, Joe. And last thing that I finish with is just the impact of alcohol. I find that this number ranges too widely each and every year. I don't think we're getting a good indicator of the true impact of alcohol. And so I want to try to do some studies to try to better understand that and to try to encourage enforcement. And then those are the natures of those studies. But I want to truly know how many people out on the water are impacted by alcohol when they become a victim. If you have any questions, there's my email information. There's my desk phone. Please leave a voicemail. They always, even if I'm not at my desk because of COVID, they always pop off into voicemails that I immediately get, and I'll return your call as soon as I can. So thank you very much for the opportunity to make a presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Vern. It was a great presentation to see what is happening in the United States. We've got quite a number of questions, but we're going to be a little compressed from a time perspective. What's equivalent to our Pleasure Craft Operator Card program here in Canada, which is a national program? You were rolling it out state by state. Are you consistent now right across all the states as far as mandatory education?
So every state has to have an education program, but they don't have to have a mandatory education requirement. So there's variation among the states as to who. More and more states are requiring something. And in the United States, the big shift has been toward reciprocity. So if I get my card in Virginia, I can boat in almost any other state without receiving any additional education. As to how hard I have to work to get it, it's only an internet-based course that can take 6 hours. So it really does, it leaves you with some knowledge, but nowhere near the skill you need to operate a boat.
For those in the audience who have taken the time to take a look at your statistics, which are incredibly in-depth, what are you finding statistically as far as accidents related to education or lack of education?
Again, we just saw that it jumped. We have a 77%. It's far more likely if you were involved in an accident in 2020 that you had no education than in 2019. So very inexperienced people with little to no education got on the water and unfortunately were victims of accidents.
There was a lot of focus with the previous presentations talking about rental boat operators. And a question we've got is, what's the situation as far as renting a boat in the States for education?
Unfortunately, because in short, in some places where you rent a boat, you only need to sit through a video, and that video can be 20 minutes long. So it leaves the operator very unprepared if they don't have a background. So, I mean, really to echo what Sergeant Voyer said, get educated and make sure that that education goes beyond just knowledge to skills.
Great. Thanks very much. There's a couple more that we will probably mail out to you or email and you could return. And we're just coming up exactly on, I'm checking the schedule here, 1:40. So we're coming up, I think, to our health break, which is going to take the next 10 minutes. So I guess we'll make the room go dark and prepare for the second half of our presentations. And in the meantime, go get yourself a glass of water, do what you need to do. And we'll see everyone back here in 10 minutes at 1:50 Eastern time. We've got a panel which is coming up now, and it's again the same focus, new boaters, how can we help? And this is focused on actually how is the marine industry working to help these new boaters. Certainly the number of new boaters has equaled new boat sales and D2D sales, driveway to driveway, used boat sales, of course, to the point that the shelves are almost bare, and essentially people are thinking a year ahead of purchasing those boats. So, of course, why we want to help them is we want to make sure that they continue to boat. That's an important thing. So from the industry, we've actually got 3 folks that will be part of the panel. Unfortunately, because of Zoom, we can't make it as interactive as we could. So these will be a series of presentations, and you have opportunities to answer or ask questions at the end. We'll have Bruce Hayes from Boating British Columbia, Rick Lazell from Boating Ontario, and Patrick Hardy from Nautism Quebec. Starting off will be Bruce from the West Coast. And let me give you a little bit of background about Bruce Haynes. He's the Executive Director of Boating BC. Now, Boating BC represents over 300 member companies and organizations in British Columbia's recreational boating industry. Prior to joining Boating BC, Bruce was the managing partner in a creative marketing agency for 25 years. Was also an elected city councillor in Surrey, which is British Columbia's second largest community. So Bruce brings a lot of experience, certainly to be able to help his members market the boats. And Bruce, tell us what's happening, how you're helping those new boaters out on the coast.
Well, thanks very much, Ted, and thank you to the Canadian Safe Boating Council for inviting me today. I certainly found this morning's, the first half of this presentation fascinating and some of the statistics, but right off the top, in keeping with yesterday's federal statutory holiday for Truth and Reconciliation, I'd just like to say that I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nation today. You know, speaking of this morning's talk or presenters, some trends are clearly emerging as to some of the problems that we're seeing on the water, and I really appreciated the perspectives of Sergeant Pick, Sergeant Boyer, and Vern Guilford from the States. Just a real quick side note, we had a vacation property in the States in Whatcom County, just south of us here in Washington State. And some of the boating regulations down there are different. And one of the things we didn't like was that they would not recognize Canadian PFDs as being approved. And so the local sheriff on the lake there made sure that all the Canadians down there had US PFDs. But one of the things I really liked, one of the regulations that they have in the States, or at least in Washington State, that I think is a really good safety piece is it's called a skier down flag. And if you're towing skiers or surfers or wakeboarders and so on, as soon as when they're in the water, somebody on board must have a red flag held way up above their head, and to indicate that there's a skier in the water. I thought that was a great safety feature, or a great safety regulation, and one that the one that we could use here in Canada as well. So as Ted said off the top, I represent the recreational boating industry in British Columbia with about 300 members. These are manufacturers, they're dealers, they're boat brokers, they're marinas, they are sailing schools, and sailing clubs, and so on. So we have seen a tremendous increase in new boater activity in British Columbia, as we have all across Canada, and as Verden was saying, in the States as well. From April to August, for instance, in British Columbia, according to Transport Canada, there's been about 10,000 either new or transferred pleasure craft licenses in the province of BC. That's the third highest in Canada, and that really is an indication of our new boaters. And so what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is just give you a sense of what we're doing at Boating BC to help encourage safe boating practices, to try and sort of nurture along the new boaters that we're seeing out in the waters, and working with our members, our dealers, and our brokers, and so on, to take a very active role in making sure that there's confidence in those new boaters when they get out in the water. Of course, it's much harder when somebody buys a boat off a driveway to be able to interact with them, and that's why we have a very social active social media campaigns and so on, which I'll speak about in a minute. But we have a number of different campaigns. It was I think Sergeant Pick this morning was mentioning the southern resident killer whales and the exclusion zones and things like that. So we're very active in promoting these kinds of regulations and that sort of thing, and we encourage people to take a boating course beyond the PCOC. We also do public service announcements. There's a really good PSA campaign that's available on Shaw Cable and TELUS, and it's for U.S. specialty channels like ESPN, CNN, and so on, Fox and others. And these PSAs run all throughout the summer. These PSA campaigns, public service announcements, and it's really, really cost effective for an organization like us to be able to get on TV. It's I think it was about $2,500 for the whole season, and that had thousands and thousands of impressions on, as I said, on cable TV. And in years past, we've been encouraging people to get out in the water. That's part of our campaign to encourage new boaters to get on the water. And we've really shifted that focus to get on the water safely. So I'll just run, I hope this will work, but I'll just run this first campaign, the PSA.
As families throughout BC look for local, safe recreation, it's no wonder many are looking to get out on the water. From self-powered sailing and sports boats to fishing or cruising, there's no better way to enjoy the great outdoors. But safety must be a top priority. Get your Pleasure Craft operator's card and follow all safety guidelines. Wear an approved flotation device, no alcohol or drugs while boating, and make sure you stow all required safety equipment. Visit boatingbc.ca for the tips and info you need to get on the water. After all, BC is better on a boat.
So we're running those PSAs, as I said, on across all the cable networks. Now, one of the things that we've done this year is we applied for and were granted 2 boating safety campaign grants from Transport Canada, and everybody thinks that they're different, but I can assure you that the boating in coastal waters, if you've never done it, is absolutely different than boating in freshwater. And I grew up in Southern Ontario and was in cottage country for years and years, and we boated, and I thought that I was a fairly proficient boater and knowledgeable. And we moved out to the West Coast about 30 years ago, and dropped our boat into the ocean. And my goodness, what an incredible difference it is compared to boating in lakes. When you have freighters out there, you've got ferries out there, you've got tides and rocks and shipping channels and all those kinds of things. It's just a completely different boating experience than it is recreational boating on lakes. So those are that is one of the issues that we're having. And I'm just going to, I don't seem to have my slides up at all now. So we did, I'm just going to go back for a second here. So we were awarded grants from Transport Canada for a shared waterways program, which is a year-long program, which we're in market with right now. And this is a really important program, particularly for coastal waters, in that this is the interaction between small recreational boats and some small commercial boats like fishing boats, and then large vessels. And we were fortunate to get this grant, and we partnered with Port Metro Vancouver, as well as BC Ferries, to be able to bring messaging of this campaign to the public. And to do this, we've developed a Boat Safe BC brand that all our boating safety messages will go under. So this Boat Safe BC brand it allows us to get out there on social media, get out there on the TV, get out there with our boat shows and dock walks and all the things that we do to deliver the safety boating messages. So the Shared Waterways campaign, these are 2 print ads and our digital social media ads. The one on the left there, you see a yield sign in the water, and you always follow the rules of the road, do the same on the water. And the tagline, stay clear to stay safe. On the right, can you spot the family out for an afternoon cruise? Neither can the captain of this ship. And there's a quarter of a mile on some of these vessels. There's a quarter of a mile blind spot from the bridge out the front of the ship. And you see people all the time cutting in front of these large commercial vessels, and it's just absolutely scary. So again, stay clear to stay safe. And we did these are 3 of the 15-second commercials, and I hope we've got audio on them, but I'll just do these quickly for you as well.
Can you spot the family of 4 out for an afternoon cruise? Neither can the captain of this cargo ship. So if you can't see the bridge can't see you. For more tips on how to share our waterways, visit boatingbc.ca.
And you can see then with the Boating BC brand and the Boat Safe BC brand, how they nest together and work together quite well. And here's the second one.
It takes a BC ferry up to 1 kilometer to avoid collision if another vessel suddenly crosses their path. Always give ferries a wide berth.
For more tips on how to share our waterways, visit boatingbc.ca.
And the third one that we're in market with right now?
It's a picture-perfect day on the water. Don't ruin it with a risky selfie. Give big boats a wide berth. Stay back to stay safe. For more tips on how to share our waterways, visit boatingbc.ca.
And one of the things that the Boating BC does is puts on the Vancouver International Boat Show every year. It's the largest boat show in Western Canada, and it gets about 30,000 attendees every year, except last year when it was virtual. And we're very much hoping that we'll be live and in person again this coming February. But just like the boat show in Ontario, there's hundreds and hundreds of seminars that go on throughout the show, many of them on boating safety. We have a 30-foot booth ourselves there that we're promoting boating safety at, and encouraging, because this is where so many of the new boaters are getting their first taste of the boating world. They come, and whether they buy off a driveway or buy from a dealer, they're almost assured to be one of the 30,000 people that come to this show every year to find out what's new out there. And so we are encouraging people all the time with the boating safety messages and so on. So I am clear out of time, and I'm going to leave it there. But thank you very much, Ted, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Bruce. It was great to hear some of the things you're doing, and the ads look fabulous. They're really, really well done. Congratulations, they're great work. Yeah, very good. We're going to move into Central Canada, and next up is Rick Lazell, longtime friend of the Canadian Safe Boating Council and the marine industry overall. Rick's been around like 30 years or more. I know that for sure. His more, I thought so. Yeah. Rick's career has seen all kinds of roles, many senior roles as well within Yamaha Canada's Marine Division, a period of time with one of Canada's largest recreational boat insurance providers. And in July 2017, hands on the helm, Rick moved into taking the helm of Boating Ontario. Rick is a passionate boater himself. I read a few of the stories, by the way, on Boat Blurred. Very good writing and cool trip you were on. Spending a lot of his time here on Lake Simcoe, which is in my backyard, and of course, Georgian Bay, aboard his 32-foot Regal cruiser. So Rick, give us a status of what's happening here with Boating Ontario and new boaters here in this province.
Great, Ted. Thanks very much, and thanks to everyone at the Canadian Safe Boating Council for the opportunity today. And have to say, Bruce, fabulous job. So envious of what you're doing out there with the Shared Waterways campaign, and looking forward to continuing to work along with Boating BC and all the tools that you bring. Last sidebar comment. I know I got to say this. He's going to give me heck for saying it, but I know my buddy Dave Moffat was watching Vern's presentation, going, "Man, I wish I had all that data." Dave and I had a safety meeting on board the boat about a month ago, and we talked about availability of data within the Canadian market and the landscape. So onto the presentation deck. I want to take a bit of a different spin. Our focus is how can we help new boaters? Certainly recognize that the numbers that are being tossed around are relevant, certainly here in Ontario as they are everywhere else. Our primary communication link is to the industry. We have an offshoot naturally to the consumer as well. So you'll see a bit of a scatter approach as I go through the few slides that I've got for you today. And some of this is direct to consumer, some is direct to industry. When the pandemic began, one of our first assignments, we rolled our sleeves up within 30 days of the March 17th, 2020 lockdown, we had created 2 social distancing best practices guides. So this is a year ago, not the spring of this year. We got those in front of the government of Ontario, April 17th. 2 weeks later, the marinas were given the right to reopen and begin preparing the fleet. To give you a perspective, we have 520 members in the province of Ontario. We service and take care of 40,000 boat slips and about 100,000 boats in total in all that we store. You can't flip a switch at a marina and magically get the fleet ready. We did a revision, if you will, on the best practices guides this spring, sent them back to the government, and again, anticipating another potential lockdown. Let me share, there's 2 different variations of these guides. One is for our staff, the 30,000 employees that we have here in the province of Ontario. The other is for boaters, to help them understand when you go to a marina or a boat dealership during a pandemic, here's what you have to expect. And the tools were created so that a member could quite simply grab the information, whether it was a specific safety package or an arrival, any of the other COVID protocols. Here's the things you have to understand. And any of our members could quickly get that message out through their own communication platforms directly out to the public. We have a publishing partner that supports the creation of our member directory that has been in print forever and ever. Our plan was to launch an app in January of 2022. We accelerated that by a full 12 months and launched it in 2021. Why? Because the world had gone so virtual. We were very, very pleased to add the Safe Boating Guide to the app in June of this year, thanks to the support of Honey Walsh and her team at Transport. And I didn't put in here, and I should have, I apologize. We have a dedicated page on boatingontario.ca. There's a tab for Go Boating, and underneath that, there is a responsible boating page. We track over 15,000 hits a month. I know my friend Joe Gatfield will smile when I say we make repeated reference to many of the tools from the CSBC on that page itself. Social media energy, we have ramped up and reached out with two different tacks. We create our own assets and our own messaging for consumers. What you see there is one of many, many, many tools that we provide out there on the market. We also have a share strategy. So we look to all of our partners, whether it's Transport, CSBC, or whomever, that we share their tools and their information. Primarily from the consumer side on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we had a 24% increase in our reach in all those platforms in 2021. And we have recently launched a pretty aggressive campaign into the LinkedIn side of things. Not directly affecting safety and what we're talking about today, but I want to share with you, we're very proud to be, and I call this a little bit beyond the boat. We partnered with the Council of the Great Lakes Region and Pollution Probe a year ago and initiated a project called the Great Lakes Plastics Cleanup. We currently sit at over 25 of our member facilities actively involved in this campaign. There is a buy-in for the members, but what you saw on the page previous was an actual C-bin. It is essentially a garbage can in the water that picks out microplastics and various other garbage, and they're all being analyzed in through various universities in the province. Instead of regional meetings, which we normally do in the spring of each year, we do 10 of them across the province. We did 2 days of campaigns we called Never Stop Growing. And there's various pieces of safety messaging that I've extracted to share with you today. One is an alliance that we have with the Electrical Safety Authority and their program for electrical safety around the dock. Drowning when there is stray electrical current in a marina is an awful situation. It is unfortunately usually a grandchild of a parent who's got a grandparent who's got a boat at the marina, and the kid just says, I need to go in for a swim, and away they go, not knowing there's stray current they're running. We have had about 45 of our members actually jump onto this program with ESA, and very pleased to see some of the safety situations we've picked up from there. As we continue to look at safety messaging, I brought these two pieces from betterboater.ca, another CSBC tool, because I think they're fantastic. They print out very easily. They can very easily go into a member newsletter, and we encourage the membership to grab this because fundamentally, navigational aids, rules of the road, being prepared, and what safety equipment you need, those are, and we've talked about this a whole bunch in the introductory sessions, these are the messages that our new boaters today are desperately in need of getting. So I think we've got to keep bringing those different messages to them. And we felt that was a great start to that. We also shared with the membership updates on where the rental boat safety checklist was at. Again, this was in April of this year. In the center there, you note that there is a new insurance exclusion. Rental boats, if a person rents a boat in the province of Ontario, they are not covered for anybody that they tow behind that rental boat. So if you're towing a tube, a skier, a wakeboarder, or what have you, there's no coverage. We provide our members with digital forms to protect them and their business. We were actually able to get this new language in front of our lawyers and integrated into the rental agreement before the season kicked off. And we also shared with the membership the specific Transport Canada personal watercraft safety checklist for rentals as well. Blasting through this, we've done student training programs for years in the industry, typically train about 100 students a year. That all pivoted to marine personnel training days, we called them. Over the last couple of years, we went 100% virtual, and I'm going to tell you the numbers were 200% successful. I'll give you those in a minute. The focus here is fuel safety, because we know what happens. We've all seen what happens if there is a fire at a fuel dock at a marina. It is to get those tools and that information down to the kids that pump the gas and cut the grass at the marinas. Craig Hamilton, who many of you will know through his boaterskills.ca company, where he trains families on the water. He is our lead instructor for this program. He does a fantastic job. Also explaining to students that you got to put this thing down when you're greeting a boat, how to tie up a boat safely at a dock. Here's a big one: spill response. Where does it start? It starts with that young lady pushing the red button to shut off the fuel immediately, but it expands itself to how do you use a boom, and how do you continue to mitigate any further damage in the water, on the water. It also gets into what to do and who to call. How do you throw a life ring? When we were doing these meetings in person, Craig actually would have the students physically stand there and throw a life ring. It's amazing how many people do not have a clue what to do. Yes, I've got a life ring on my boat. Do I know how to use it? Not a clue. Where's the first aid kit? All that kind of things. So we have run typically about 8 or 9 of these a year. As I said earlier, they were around 150, I think was the maximum that we got. I should back up and share that every student that takes this program gets their own certificate. It goes to the manager at the marina. So if there's an inspection, Ministry of Labor inspection, the marinas can say, yes, we're protected. The numbers are the magic here. We trained over 350 students in 2021, which from our perspective makes the dock safer, makes the fuel handling safer, and that is better for all of us. So thank you for the time, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Rick. Boy, you sure packed that into your 10 minutes. Great work. My head's spinning. Some great programs you've got happening. Great programs. Good to see that. And I appreciate the plug for some of the stuff that we've built that you're using and that your members are using. So if you get any questions for Bruce or for Rick, please put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can get some time to get them all out. Now we're moving to Quebec with Patrick Hardy. So Patrick is the Vice President of Nautism Quebec. Now he's been involved with Nautism Quebec for a couple of years, but he's a lifelong boater, a lifelong boating enthusiast with from a business background, 20 years of sales and marketing from a telecommunications and the technology sector to BCI Marine, which is a boat distributor that Patrick founded. BCI Marine offers watercraft dealers simplified turnkey solutions for the distribution and sale of the brands that it represents, including the X-Shore, which is an exceptionally eco-friendly electric boat. Patrick's here to be able to give us a perspective of what the marine industry is doing in the province of Quebec, to be able to support and help all of the new boaters that I know you're experiencing there.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, and thank you to the council. And, being the last panelist on board is always nice, because you had Rick and Bruce with about a combined 6,000 years of experience, just setting the benchmark really high. So thanks, guys, for setting me up for this. I really appreciate this. Of course, my first language is French, so I think I should be good to go through this in English, but bear with me and ask questions during the presentation, if you will. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. In Quebec, of course, you might say we always like to do things differently, so I'm just going to do this live on screen. We put on the market a safety campaign about 2 years ago, which is named Suivez la vague, which basically means just follow the wave, that went towards proper boating etiquette. Obviously, last year when the pandemic started, everybody rushed to the waterways, the inland waterways, the rivers, the lakes, and the driveway sales completely exploded. And that did cause some concern and some issues. The first things we did is we doubled down on the promotional campaign for our safety ads. But what we also did is went towards a grassroots movement. We actually reached out and sat down with different patrol teams, maybe police, Coast Guard, auxiliary Coast Guard, the firemen who patrol certain local areas, and even Parks Canada, who have a hands-on discussion and a face-to-face discussion with a lot of folks in the locks. And being, anybody boating anywhere from between Quebec and Ontario, we get to be masters at going through locks with our boats. The other thing we also added was start using social media influencers and social media moderators throughout our main Facebook groups in the province that are mainly managed by businesses that started Facebook discussion groups to get some business and blown into these great forums where the boaters will go on and ask tips and tricks to their friends and colleagues and co-captains and say, well, what should I do with this? What should I do with that? The influencers were able to reach out and really penetrate into the boating community and help share tips and help share experience. Another thing that we did through these influencers is we started promoting the independent boat captains who give training courses to these new owners. And that skyrocketed. So these guys, individual businesses, so these guys are independents with a lot of years. We have one, Michel, I'll use Michel as an example. He's a looper. So he's done the great loop, and he goes onto the boards with the captains, and a lot of the captains are females, and we're glad to see that ramping up. We tend to see a maybe better behavior from a lot of the women captains, and we've seen Michelle's business completely explode, and we helped a lot of other captains go into this business and help our boaters to get better training. Some of the issues that we are having is proper etiquette on the water. I think people go out on the water to sort of forget what we're going through right now. And we have seen some challenges. In the upcoming years, what we're hoping to do is get closer to our marina operators, work with them so they can get proper signage to get people to slow down in the no wake zones. That has been an issue. But we've also reached out, like I mentioned, to different patrol units and see how we can work with different municipalities and get more patrols out there. We'd like to see people do our patrols, just some routine friendly stops, and remind people that boating is meant for pleasure, it's meant for fun, but there is some danger out there. I really like the skier down flag idea, Bruce, and if you wish, and if you allow me to, I'm going to bring that as an example to this province. I think we could use that here. What we've also seen is a lot of issues with access to public boat ramps and access to lakes. What that is causing is overcrowding in certain waterways. So there's maybe too many boaters out there for the amount of water that's available. How do you calculate that? Maybe almost impossible to calculate that. But we're also seeing that when there's a lot of boaters out there, it doesn't take many boaters or PWC operators to throw things sideways. So every day and every night, we've had these social media moderators and social media influencers be active through social media, through videos and quick interventions to try to control the narrative so people stay within the proper boating etiquette. What we are moving towards and tying into what Bruce said is the boat show in February, and we sure hope that the boat shows will come back and come back strong. But the boat show in Montreal should have a huge focus on safety. This is absolutely important to have a focus on safety. I think we are an easy target maybe sometimes for the news outlets, and we'd like to make sure that we're telling a good story out to the public so we can keep these traditions going for future generations. To dock safety, one program that we are looking at is we are on the drawing board to support our marina owners and operators as to getting some proper electrical requirements for the future. Where I'm going with this is I think we're going to see some high demand really quickly for fast charging stations in our docks and maybe medium fast charging stations on our docks for some of the bigger boats. And we know that a lot of the electrical engineering behind these marinas, maybe they're not up to par, and that can cause some issues. Now, the market will push the industry to react quicker than we all think it's going to happen. I have a tendency to think that this will hit us faster than we think it will. So we are at the whiteboard stage of putting together a plan on how to support our marina operators to say, well, this is the direction you should take. And this is the funding that's available through different levels of government to help you guys meet the demands of your clients in the future. Or where we've seen Taiga that's out of Quebec with the electrical PWCs. I don't want to plug Exshore, but Exshore is a performing boat, but that's not going to be the only one. We saw Beneteau talk about hybrid and electrical powered boats. So electricity is going to be another aspect for security in the future, but for owners who are going to want quick chargers at home as well. You know, make sure you go through a proper electrician. Though this is not a DIY project. You don't want 200 volts just dangling by your dock just because you have an electric craft. So all that said, these are exciting times for the boating industry, certainly challenging times for the boating industry. And I'm open for questions. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free. I'll send it back to you, Ted.
Great, thanks so much. So Patrick, Rick, Bruce, I have a couple of questions, and maybe rather than direct them to one or the other, we could kind of go around the room, because I think that they basically are relevant no matter where you are in Canada. And with all those new boaters out on the water, do you think that boating safety plays a role in keeping those new boaters out on the water? And Patrick, you were last up, so why don't you answer that for me? So do you think boating safety helps keep those new boaters once you've got them out on the water and to keep them boating?
I think it's necessary to keep them out on the water and to keep them in the industry. And the comparisons I like to make is if we get somebody out hunting for the first time, there's certainly safety regulations there. And a new hunter who wants to practice hunting safely needs guidance and needs support and needs the communications. And I think the proper and responsible hunter, we want to keep those people in the industry. And I'd have a tendency to say that we're going to want to keep those good boaters so they can pass on traditions to future generations.
Thanks, Patrick. Working our way west, Rick, Ontario, what was your viewpoint of that?
Yeah, I think safety has to be part of the message, Ted. And I think, you know, I'll echo what Patrick said, but I'll give you a different spin too. I think we've got to find a way to get that message to the customer. And I really think part of the magic is there. We've got to find the buy-in from the dealer body. We've got to find the buy-in at the marina level. We've got to find and we've also got to create consistency. Because right now, if you just Google boating safety messaging in Canada, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You thought my presentation was fast, Ted. There's so much stuff out there, right? So I think there's a couple of pieces. Quick answer, yes, we have to do it. How do we do it? How do we do it so they listen, so they hear us? I think that's a conversation that we as an industry need to have together.
Great. Bruce.
I agree with what's been said. And last year at our conference, our industry conference, it was a big part of the theme was how do we turn first-time new boaters into lifelong boaters, and boating safety just percolated to the top as far as what's really important. And as we heard this morning with those canoers out on the lake, that's the last time they're going canoeing, the first and the last time they're ever going. And so if people have a bad scare or run into a problem, that boat is then going to sit on their driveway for the next 2 years and then just be sold. And the cost of acquisition to get a new boater into the industry, we all want them to have 2-foot itis from an industry perspective. And so we have to make sure that they're safe out there.
Great. Well, Bruce, you were last up on this one, so you're going to be first up on my next question. And could you identify, let's think a handful, let's say maybe 3 issues that you think would concern a new boater about safety? So, I mean, essentially, out of our fairly wide spectrum of information that we're trying to present to them, what do you think would be the top 3 concerns that a boater would have about safety?
Well, from what we've heard and the questions that come into our office all the time, is just an overall general lack of knowledge. The PCOC card, they went out and got their PCOC card. I think we'll all agree that while that is a bare sort of minimum level of competency, it doesn't tell you how to boat. It tells you the rules of the road and some etiquette issues, but it doesn't tell you how to boat. And so we get questions all the time of, where can I take a course? Where can I take a course? And so we make sure that our website is up to date with all the courses that people can take. With COVID, of course, it's been sort of classroom online only, rather than on the water. But really, I think that trepidation about getting onto the water and not knowing, how to dock or what to do or things like that, I think that's top of mind for the new boaters.
Rick, Ontario, what's your perspective of maybe, I wouldn't say three, but an issue or a couple of issues?
Okay, so I'm going to give you I'm going to respond with, and I love the fact that I got to go second because I threw some cryptic notes down. But my buddy Meatloaf, who said 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So here's what I got. I got confidence and confusion. As a new boater, we need to give them confidence in how to drive the boat and how to launch the boat, how to dock the boat, how to have their guests on board, all that. Confusion in the messaging, in the what am I supposed to do? Where do I go to get the information? How do the rules change depending on where I am and weather and everything else? So confidence and confusion, that's my response.
Okey doke. Patrick, and it's not good enough to just say ditto, ditto, okay? even if it's just ditto, okay?
I'd like to push it and thanks guys for letting me go last. I appreciate it. You guys knocking off the good answers. No, I'm just kidding. There's one thing that always stands out to me in these social media discussions, and I'm really active in the industry, is people getting confused. What's proper navigation equipment? Your cell phone with navionics won't cut it. And through our education, I think we need to get people to understand what's proper equipment, how should it be used, and when should it be used, and why is it used, and going back to training. And when we get to a certain size boat, I think it's important that people understand 12 volt, 110 volts, when do these systems work, what's an impeller and whatnot. I mean, after this PCOC training, I can go out and buy a 65 footer and head out in the water. That doesn't make sense. I needed to take a special course in Quebec to have my wife as a passenger on my ATV on one of the logged trails in the province. So there's a big discrepancy there. And I think we could do better. Uniting and banding together, Rick, absolutely. If we can have a consistent message and we can work together with Transport Canada to have a national campaign adapted to the language and the values or whatever in every province, I think would go a long way, but a multi-year effort that we just repeat and repeat, like we did with firearms, like we did with seatbelts in the 70s. Unfortunately, the seatbelts in the 70s, we went through PR campaigns that didn't work. What ended up working were tickets. So can we find a happy medium or the right blend of both? I think doing this on the national level would help our industry and at the end of the day, our dealers and our boat owners.
It's really heartening to hear that the boaters that you're finding in the water, the new boaters, and maybe even the more seasoned boaters as well, are looking for education. Like Rick, to your point, eliminating the confusion, increasing the competency, which is really heartening to hear. I think this is the kind of discussion that could go on and on and on. I have the sense of that. Unfortunately, I got the little note and we're right on time, which I'm pretty excited about. John Gullick, eat your heart out. We're right on time. So thanks, guys. It's been a delight to hear what's happening across the country in each of your respective areas. I'm glad to hear and glad to have you here presenting. So next up, we're going into the future. Baz Kirk is joining us. Baz has presented at a lot of our symposiums. He's a great guy to have on deck. They do some pretty incredible things in New Zealand, where Baz is the manager of sector engagement and collaboration. Maritime New Zealand, and they focus on new ways of reaching new and not so new boaters in New Zealand. And they work through behavioral change using technology and new ways of thinking. So I know Baz came in about 3 or 4 hours ago, around 4 o'clock in the morning, his time, to prepare and to be on deck. So 7:30, you probably got 20 or 30 coffees into you now, Baz. Hopefully you're not in your pajamas. No, you're not in your pajamas, which is good. So we're all eager to hear what's happening in New Zealand.
Let's jump into it. So, okay, so yeah, the next slide, please, Ellen. Alrighty, so hey, it's great to be here, people, and you know, as we know, COVID is like the rest of the world is just hammering New Zealand, and because of that, though, you know, we've found through a number of different organisations that we work with that COVID has actually increased our recreational boating activity, and people are new boaters coming in dramatically. So, you know, what those people were doing, which New Zealand had a culture of travel prior to COVID. Kiwis back in the early days when I was a little boy were all about staying home and doing things like camping and hunting and fishing and stuff like that. As we get older, they moved into the going to see the big wide world. And so people didn't kind of spend much on luxury goods. They spent a lot of money more on things like overseas travel, cruising, and all those sort of things. So what's happened with COVID, though, is that it's come back into Kiwis boating in their backyards, getting back to doing what they used to do, what their grandparents taught them to do when they were kids. And that has given us some quite massive challenges actually now, because, you know, old boaties doing new activities and new boaties doing new activities, there's a big mix, and there's a change in the way that we need to try and deal with those people. Next slide, please, Ellen. So part of the new way of doing approach in New Zealand is we have a behaviour change campaign coming up. So in the past, we've always focused on kind of every year we have a new fresh message and fresh campaign. So we might base on some of the key messages that we have, like wearing life jackets or communications and stuff like that. Last year, we started to work into the behaviour change area where we developed a new program called What's Your Plan? What's Your Plan was designed to get in front of boaties before they even decide to go anywhere close to the water. So, you know, What's Your Plan is around getting boaties to start thinking about, if they're at home, having a few beers with their friends, thinking about possibly going boating for the weekend. That was the messaging that we were trying to target people. So, you know, so building that whole thing around if they're going to go boating on the weekend, rather than talking about what they're going to catch or what they were going to do out on the water, it was more about trying to get them to start thinking about how they were going to go and do it and the gear that they needed to take with them. So moving forward, we've just brought on a new advertising agency called Federation. Federation is a pretty upmarket group in New Zealand who do a lot of behaviour change campaign work for road traffic and work with New Zealand Police a lot. And so what they're doing is coming in with a new campaign called The Water is Calling. And The Water is Calling will start off with 5 ways to be safe on the water. And a lot of that is around picking up from the What's Your Plan campaign, What's Your Plan moving through to the Water is Calling campaign. So there's a pretty fluid transition going through the 2 campaigns. And then that campaign will start to liven up and be initially for 2 years, but then work its way potentially out to 5 years. So there should be an ongoing rollover of campaign stuff. So shifting backwards and forwards as to learnings, we need to go back and improve on some stuff maybe the year later. In Port Credit, I talked about the sigmoid curve of you know, needing to change the way you were doing things and adding bits and pieces into your material so that nothing would kind of look stagnant or look the same from the year before. So this is what is kind of going to be the baseline for this new campaign. So we'll see how it goes. I'm quite excited about it. It's got quite a big cultural aspect to it as well. So know the ways of the water before you leave the land is the kind of the key tagline for the work that we're doing. And that is very much around, from New Zealand's heavily culturally influenced, obviously. And so it's also about recognizing all of those different cultures that we have in New Zealand, because a lot of those cultures now, especially Pacific Island, Māori, and some of the Asian countries in that are very, very strongly starting to feature in our statistics now. Next slide, please, Alan. So 1.7 Kiwi adults now recreational boating. So this is the 2020 stats towards the end of 2020. In Port Credit, when I was there, that was 1.53 million people, I think it was. So exponential growth in the Kiwis now boating. And you still see, and when my kind of consistent line all the way through every time I've spoken at every conference around the world, it's the older age Kiwi male who is the ones that is dying the most, and you can see there by that graphs. The Kiwi males are still very, very high in our statistics. These statistics are taken over 5 years. And so now we're starting with the behaviour change campaign, starting to burrow down into, what it is that we really need to understand about people before they actually get out on the water. What are those lead ups? What are those kind of environments that they're walking around and kind of attaching themselves to that might lead them to make decisions before they actually get on the water? Because what we do know now is a lot of the time, they make a decision because of something that has either happened or something that has driven them, something that they believe, stuff like that. So when they get out on the water, it's not so much about them making the decision to do something, getting it wrong, and then falling in the water. It is more about actually understanding their environment, whether they come from, or whether that's their cultural background, their beliefs, their religious beliefs, all those sorts of things is where we're starting to burrow in. We can see also in the fatalities, the most people drown, or the most people that die actually. So we don't kind of always say drowning, because people don't always drown; they actually die. Is just purely because people fall in the water. They end up in the water not wearing a life jacket. So the 2/3 of all recreational boating deaths could have been prevented by people wearing life jackets. That is still very much a standard, I think. So you can see that, overboard is the most followed closely by capsizes, and capsizes a lot of the time because New Zealand has so many bar harbours. They're shallow bars, heavily influenced by tidal rips. When you get areas where there's big estuaries and small bar entrances, especially the mid-tide, when mid-tide on the outflow is when the bars get really, really rough and people get it wrong. Next slide, please, Alan. So, looking at the year of fatalities, 11 years, we're starting to look at now, what are the trends? The trends are simply, we cannot define what the main causal factors are of fatalities in New Zealand. So recreational boating, has always been up around that 19 to 20 average in deaths across a 10-year span. It's kind of decreased a wee bit, and we're not sure whether that's just because of lockdowns in areas of New Zealand at those peak times of boating. But if you look at, 2019, just before COVID hit, we were pretty heavy in our boating activity around the country. 2020, COVID came in. We had a couple of big lockdown periods, but the issues that we found was immediately people were able to get out from level 4, level 3, and get out on the water. We started seeing accidents immediately and fatalities happening. 2021, so this time of the year, it's only September, we're at 11. And the challenge for us now is that Auckland, New Zealand is in level 3, the rest of the country is at level 2. There is some boating activity, but we're enforcing the rules around recreational boating in the rest of the country as being, keep it pretty close to shore and stay safe. In Auckland, you can't go boating at the moment anyway. So, the big risk that we've got coming for us right now is that when we go to level 3, when we go to level 2, potentially people will start going boating, and then we're going to have some issues. So we do know that, that number is going to grow and potentially probably overtake where we were last year, which is a bit of a worry. Next slide, please. So, again, when you look at New Zealand, we look at the North Island fatalities that we have, and the top half of the North Island, where you see all of those red dots, that is where probably 60% of recreational boating actually happens in New Zealand. So, it's the biggest area. You've got Auckland there where that close series of dots are. And then all the way up north, and then on the right-hand side on the eastern seaboard there in the Bay of Plenty, that's another heavily populated area of boating. Interesting though, we did some work on this and graphed out some of the areas where we need to start focusing in on, especially in the behaviour change area. And you can see quite clearly there that in the South Island, there is the areas in the Central Lakes and the Central South Island areas where a lot of recreational boating fatalities happen. And those are some of our challenge areas. So, cold water immersion and stuff like that is starting to become a feature. We know that in the South Island, the difference between water temperatures, even in the summertime, is dramatically colder than the North Island. So the North Island, you get a lot of the Pacific currents coming through. So, fairly warm waters coming down from the islands and stuff like that. You don't get that in the South Island. So traditionally, you get cold water most of the time in the South Island. Central Plateau in both of the North Islands, because of the mountains and snow peaks and stuff like that, there the water is always snow fed, and so therefore you get a lot of deaths. Power boats featuring again as being, those areas where fatalities, the culture of not wearing life jackets is quite bad. And then small dinghies and stuff like that. So, when we determine a dinghy is anything that's just powered by oars. So even you could have if you would want to call a power boat and take the motor off it, but still row it, you would be then determining as a dinghy. A lot of the time they're kind of seen as being those things that service boats on moorings and stuff like that, because there's a lot of those in New Zealand. And people just don't wear a life jacket in one of those little servicing dinghies. And that the main reason is because if they're going from the boat to the shore, they go and put their little dinghy on the shore, and then what do they do with the life jacket? So they're worried about it getting pinched. So what they do is just leave it on board the main boat. The issue is 9 times out of 10 when they come back, and for many reasons as to what happens when they get up to when they go into town for the day, that's when we see the fatalities. One of the good points there though is if you look at the kayak and canoe stats. So culture of wearing life jackets and canoes and stuff like that is a lot better. It seems to be a fairly typical type of thing that people would take. And I see a little bit of a glitch in my PowerPoint there. When you see jet skis and other, so there's 3 fatalities in there, and that's just an idea of what's happening in that scene. So, for new boaties, the challenge for us is to make them and to get them to understand that, don't just carry the life jacket, put it on. And so the behaviour change campaign is focusing on a lot of areas, in some of the cultural areas, and that to have cultural influence. So, those people, cultural leaders. So for the people, by the people. Is some of the areas that we need to be showing some of that leader influence stuff. And it's exactly the same with the vaccine rollouts in New Zealand and stuff like that. Vaccine rollout is not happening that well until you get those cultural leaders involved, and to get people actually to just get on with it, because they have their ways of doing things, they have their beliefs. Unfortunately for New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, the water is very much part of their natural habitat. Boats for them are tools, they're not pleasure boats, so they're used to go and get food and stuff like that. They don't want to clutter up the boat or make themselves uncomfortable wearing a life jacket, so they just don't do it. Next slide, please. So the Safer Boating Forum, this is where, this is the kind of the group that's similar to the Canadian Safe Boating Council and all of the groups that sit next to that. This is where we do all of our understanding and learning from 25 member organisations. And 25 member organisations, those are organisations of organisations. So every member of the New Zealand Safer Boating Forum has quite a large constituency of smaller subgroups and stuff like that attend to them. So they advise the Safer Boating Forum on best practice. They are the ones that all come together and become one. So when we're talking about being one, it's the Safer Boating Forum that writes position statements for life jacket wear, for drugs and alcohol on board vessels and stuff like that. So, and that is so when Maritime New Zealand speaks to government about the challenges in the recreational boating sector, Maritime New Zealand is the transport regulator, or the so for maritime, but we don't speak unless it's actually something from a regulatory focused area. We don't speak on behalf of Maritime New Zealand. We speak on behalf of the Safer Boating Forum. And why is because there's more power in the Safer Boating Forum. It's actually New Zealand Inc. speaking on behalf of Maritime New Zealand when we do that. So we've never changed away from the 5 key messages in the Boating Safety Code: wear your life jacket, take 2 waterproof, ways to call for help, check the marine weather forecast, avoid alcohol, and be a responsible skipper. One thing that is slightly changing that is in the new campaign, the new behaviour change campaign, the responsible skipper message will probably come to the top and become the umbrella message for the Safer Boating Forum. And the reason is that the life jackets and weather and forecasts, etc., and that those are risks, whereas being the responsible skipper is more of a messaging and a behaviour change opportunity to actually get in front of those people. Because what we also find in New Zealand is that not a lot of people understand, because they're in charge of a jet ski or a small dinghy with with an outboard motor on it, even inflatable with you're seeing electric powered inflatables and stuff like that these days, wind foiling boats that are becoming really, really fast now. Those people are still skippers. They are still in charge of that vessel. They still have legal responsibilities to be doing the right thing. So through the Safer Boating Forum is where we set all those things. The Watch Your Plan campaign, you'll see two little photos there in the middle of that screen, and that's the type of thing that we're doing. So taking different environments for different people and putting different thinking, so that the different thinking kind of opportunities in there for people. Down on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the No Excuses campaign. I spoke about that in Port Credit. That has actually grown exponentially now from 5 years, where we started off with 8 regional councils being involved. That's gone up to 18 regional councils and involves a lot of national and local regulators now. And it's grown really well because the foundation of that program is that it hasn't been kind of no one's told everybody to do the things that they need to be doing under No Excuses. Everybody who's involved in that has been able to design the program to fit in those local areas where we actually do the work. So it's still about repercussions for breaking the rules. It is probably our main on-water compliance campaign, where if people break the national the navigation rules or the local bylaws, then they have what we call a compliance intervention placed upon them. Compliance intervention may be anything from an infringement notice through to needing them to give us proof that they've gone and bought a life jacket, or they've gone and done the right thing. Next slide, please, Ellen. So the grants program that we run, so it's called FED, Fuel Excise Duty funding, and this round, we've just actually done the 2021 round actually. So 780 odd K has gone out, and we're still sitting on a little bit because we're still looking at some programs. Again, very much focused now on behaviour change. So it's that getting in front of people who are out there doing things. It's not spending money on the typical kind of education or media campaigns and stuff like that. This is actually about getting out there and stopping people from doing things wrong, or getting in front of them and giving them the right way to do things. Part of that reason is too, you see the little kitty there. We do things like give out waterproof bags and gear bags and stuff like that, but also it's something that's a big hit for the people is life jackets now branded with the Safer Boating logo. You see those life jackets all over the waterways now, and I've just signed off, I think, for another 60K worth of life jackets and that to be used by the compliance campaigns and stuff like that. People can either buy those from us off the water, or if depending on what their situation is, we might give them a life jacket, but then they might need to give us some advice or some kind of some proof and evidence that they might be going to do a recreational boating course or something like that. The challenge also in New Zealand is that there is no mandatory requirement for people in charge of vessels to go and get a license or registration or anything like that. It's a voluntary thing, and we've at the moment we've got a few MPs in government who are looking at pushing through mandatory life jacket wear. The Safer Boating Forum is very, very keen for that to happen. But the skipper licensing and registration work that's coming through, our suggestion is that we would like to use the Tasmanian model. So some of you have met Peter Hopkins from Tasmania, so we work very, very closely with the Australians. And the model that they've got there is the mandatory skipper qualifications and licensing program that they've got. All of that money that's taken from that goes back into developing free education programs and stuff like that. So it actually doesn't cost you to go and get licenses and registrations, because what it does is just generates people to be doing the right thing. So that's something that we're looking at, and if we can get that across the line, that'll be good. But as you know, when you're dealing with governments and you're trying to get stuff that has some political interest and, dare I say it, some political challenge when you've got some constituents who don't want to comply, makes it very, very hard to get through government. But, so again, we look at using those influences in the community. So, who does mum and dad listen to? 9 times out of 10, they listen to the kids. You drive down the road without your seatbelt on, who's going to tell you to put your seatbelt on? It's the kids. You drive down the road and you're speeding, you're a little bit over the speed limit, who's going to tell you to slow down? It's usually the kids. So a lot of our funding in that is very much focused on getting in front of those people who will listen and who will actually say that, get the messaging on our behalf. So as I said before, we have a lot of experienced boaties in New Zealand. The issue that we've got though is that a lot of those experienced boaties are now doing new activities. So it's not just about new boaters in New Zealand, it's very much about experienced boaters doing new activities as well. And kayak incidents and stuff like that, people going holidaying, so getting in a little inflatable or a kayak is becoming something that's pretty widespread in New Zealand. Next slide, please.
With the start of Safer Boating Week, we're encouraging people to prep, check and know as they head back on the water.
And it doesn't matter what size of watercraft we're dealing with, whether it be a motor cruiser through to a kayak, the principles remain the same. We want to give people the knowledge to be safe on the water. The sort of things that we cover is the equipment. Make sure that your life jacket or flotation device fits you. If it doesn't fit, it won't work. If it doesn't float, you sink. You then got your communications. you need two forms of communications, and they must be waterproof or in a waterproof container. Doesn't matter what craft you have, you need a paddle. Make sure that that paddle is fit for purpose, fits you, and it's also what you require if your motor breaks down. It's not only knowing, it is understanding the weather. My question is to you, would you go out in these conditions?
All right. So that's as I was saying there before, the paddlecraft industry has just exploded in New Zealand. It's really hard actually to even put an idea on how many paddlecraft there is. A lot of the time, suppliers now in New Zealand, unless it's like big warehouses and stuff like that don't have good quality product, that have big shipments of stuff coming in. Most of the quality product and the well-known brands of kayak gear and stuff like that is really, really hard to get in New Zealand now. So, for us, it just tells us that a lot of people are not interested in hanging around cities and stuff anymore. All they want to do is they just want to get out there and go somewhere away from the whole COVID environment and stuff like that, and try and get back to at least some sense of, I guess, Kiwi life as we know it, because it's really, really tough times in New Zealand right now. So again, they've spoken about the No Excuses campaign. This is part of the things that we do is that getting people to just, understand what the right things to do are in regards to recreational boating. This is one of our maritime officers, Sean Patterson, out with the local harbour master. And it's doing those things. So this particular chap, he actually had the right life jackets on board for the amount of people that he had. The only issue was that they, two of them weren't the right size. So the reason there was not to actually try and berate the guy for not having the right gear on board. It was actually to just give him the right gear that he needed, because from an attitude point of view, he actually was doing the right thing. Next slide, please. Another program that we're doing now is taking journalists out on the water. So using as much of national media, national TV at peak times to actually get the stories out on the TV. The reason for this is actually to show Kiwis a little bit of themselves out on the water as well. So part of that process, obviously, is that we have to ask every single person, do you mind if your clip is shown on TV and stuff like that? So most people do. Most people are pretty happy with it. It's probably in the No Excuses campaign, some people aren't, and they don't want to be put on TV or have their names put up anywhere purely because they are doing the wrong thing. But on the whole, we've run some pretty successful campaigns in the last year, especially around getting alongside those people and just having a chat to them about what's the right thing to do. Well supported by the local harbour masters, who are the ones who've been taking the journalists out with them. Next slide, please. So this is a snippet from, and it's a wee bit long, so we'll run through parts of it, or I might just get it to cut a bit earlier. But this is a snippet of Bay of Plenty where journalists were out with the harbour master team.
Believe it or not, we still get people going out without life jackets.
From speeding jet skis to unnamed boats and vessels in the wrong place at the wrong time, the Tauranga Harbour Master sees it all. Local Focus spent a day out on the water as part of a No Excuses Day, Maritime New Zealand's summer campaign to reinforce safety by issuing breaches regardless of the excuse.
This year, we've had a lot of people buying jet skis and the new boat owners, and they haven't necessarily had the education or experience. They just go straight out on the water. Jet skis, a lot of out there haven't been registered yet. A lot of boats out there that haven't got boat names, again, which is a breach.
Before long, we'd spotted our first alleged offender.
We were on the patrol near Punipuni at the southern end of Matakana, and we saw a white powerboat clearly towing a biscuit. From our observations, it was in excess of 15 knots and within 200 metres of the shoreline. 3 children on the biscuit, and it was just him on the boat. Basically explained to him that we'd seen him exceeding 15 knots, and also that he didn't have an observer. Because when you're towing, skiing or dragging a biscuit, it's very important that you have an observer on the boat in case anyone falls off. So he admitted straight away, yes, he knew he should have had an observer. We also noticed he had no boat name, and that's one of our bylaws for operating within Tauranga here. We then explained to him about the speed limits and that you've got to be 200 metres offshore to exceed 5 knots.
A common offence is speeding within the 5-knot zone, less than 200 metres from shore.
A lot of people, it's quite hard for them to determine what 200 metres is. So it's kind of educating people of what they can do, and passing within 50 metres of another vessel, they've got to slow down, and moored boats.
Right, is everybody holding on?
The harbour master also has to make sure shipping lanes are kept clear, especially when there's a container ship coming.
We had a young lad on a wind-powered craft, and we noticed him suddenly tack at the last minute, and he was heading out straight into the commercial shipping lane in front of the vessel. So we had to act pretty promptly and tell him that he had to get out of the shipping lane, because people don't realise those large ships and vessels move very quickly. The captain or the pilot, he has a blind spot that can reach for 500 metres, so he's not necessarily aware of them actually being in front of him.
A common response to being pulled over is to point out that they're not the only ones breaking the rules.
We just dealt with the guy in the boat, and as we finished with him, he pointed out a jet ski to us and said, what about him? It's quite often busy periods, like we'll be talking to someone and there'll be other people breaching in front of us, but we can only deal with one person at a time. So we went over, we approached the jet skier. The jet ski had no registration number. It's a breach of bylaw, but we give them 14 days to get the jet ski numbers on there.
I have to give you this notice. It is a breach of bylaw. This information goes to the harbour master and they do review the footage, but by giving you this one here, you've got 14 days, okay, to have those stickers received and put onto your jet ski.
But there's still one violation that beggars belief.
Believe it or not, we still get people going out without life jackets. So we've had a few of those, especially on paddle boards and taking children out. If we find people without life jackets, they do get breached because it's very serious, but we hand out life jackets to them, which are given to us through Burns Co. And then they return those to Burns Co once they get back to the land.
Maritime New Zealand says around 20 boaties a year lose their lives. A lack of life jackets and adequate communications on board are major factors to these deaths. And with more people than ever out on the water, the need to stick to the rules has never been so important. Gavin Ogden, Local Focus.
So that's very much an insight as to what happens in New Zealand. It's it's very, very typical in those highly populated areas. Tauranga Harbour, one of those very, very busy periods, and you will get thousands and thousands and thousands of people out on the water. How do we reach some of those people? What's the new technology that we're using these days? So we've invested in things like virtual reality gear now to actually get in front of those people at boat shows and in opportunities. So we run different programs and developing more programs around giving a VR headset to a person and getting them to prepare a boat. That has been quite a big hit, and some of the regional councils now are starting to invest in those VR headsets and that. So the investment for us has gone from buying the headsets to actually developing the programs to run the headset. So it's a good thing, and it's actually growing quite rapidly. Next slide, please. A little bit of a clip here, and we'll just give you a quick snippet of that. So something else that's happening in some of the remote areas.
So what we're up to today is we're attempting to use some drone technology to really promote safer boating and engage with boaties on the water so that we can really raise awareness as to the key safer boating messages. One of the big issues that we have here with boats coming and going from the Picton Marina is speed, so we're really encouraging people to travel at a safe speed, but also to make sure that they're well planned and prepared for their journey, and that means checking the weather, that means having your boat ready to go, that means having your life jackets, wearing them and having them on board, yeah, basically the plan today is get the drone in the air. We've got a patrol boat on the water. We're going to fly the drone out over the boats, and we're going to broadcast some humorous and engaging messages, but messages that also carry important safer boating themes, so avoiding alcohol, being a responsible skipper, operating at a safe speed, having two forms of communication so that you can get help if you need it when you're on the water.
Big Brother is watching you. Are you watching for other people in boats too? Good on you.
We broadcast those messages. They come from the drone. There's a big loudspeaker on the drone, and that'll be heard by the people on their vessels. And then after we've done that and they're starting to think, wow, what was that? Not sure where that came from. They'll be looking around trying to get a sense of what's going on. It'll perhaps be a bit of a surprise to them. And then our patrol boat will be there to explain the situation, make sure that they understand that there's nothing to worry about, that everything's safe, and then we can engage with them, provide them with some safety material, and just really talk to them about those key safer boating messages.
It's the Harbour Master at 5 FM, reminding you to stay within 5 knots when you're close to shore.
So, you know, from a, I guess, a fun point of view, that's something that has been trialled in some of those remoter areas. So Picton Marina down in the South Island, quite a remote place to get to, but well populated by holiday makers. So, you know, you can kind of imagine the what's going on board the boat when all of a sudden they hear something blaring out. You know, Big Brother's watching you. And are you doing the right thing? Are you keeping a lookout and stuff like that? So, and we got some pretty good information back on that from the public. So, marketing campaigns and the rollouts of the marketing recall stuff that we do, it's pretty obvious that the What's Your Plan campaign has been getting the most kind of views and stuff like that, and it is one of the ones that are starting to gain ground now as to what we do the most and where we should be focusing our areas going forward. Next slide, please. And then, you know, how do we keep learning? What do we do? How do we understand the, you know, what's going on around there? So some of you in this forum actually, so Joe up there and Vern showing on the screen, were involved in a world forum that was run by Maritime New Zealand. And you know, part of the reason for doing that is that so we can understand and try and get some joined up messaging and stuff like that, some commonality from other places around the world. Last slide, please. And you know, this slide says it all. It's you know, what's happening in New Zealand is pretty much what's happening around the world. So you know, record sales of new craft, people staying at home. But yeah, new boating courses and virtual take up is happening around the world. I think. What are the commonalities that we did find in the World Forum is the increase in alcohol and boating related incidents, and that is definitely starting to happen in New Zealand where it actually hasn't before. Sadly, fatality rates in New Zealand and Singapore are still relatively high. Interestingly, for the rest of the world, that we learned was even though the dramatic increase in boating, fatality rates dropped overall quite a lot. But then as well, in some areas they actually were zero. So quite interesting there. Big challenge for us though is how do we keep doing this in this environment, in the COVID environment where we can't get face to face with people. We actually, you know, we just need to think about better ways of doing that. So I'm really keen to continue with the World Forum. I know that other people who have been involved are keen as well. We just need to find the time and the ability to be able to do it. Cheers.
Baz, thanks very much. It was a great presentation. I do have one question for you, which came in from Jean Murray. And she was wondering, do you think there's any differences in boaters' attitudes and behaviors between New Zealand and Canada?
I think difference in attitudes, probably no. Difference in understanding, yes. So the understanding that I see the Canadians have is that they know that there's a requirement to have things like qualifications and experience and knowledge, proof of experience and stuff like that, proof of qualifications. In New Zealand, the understanding is that there's no legal requirement for me to have that. So don't tell me that I have to have it because I don't need it.
Got it. Great. By the way, we had 7 Kiwis in our cold water boot camp course last night. So just letting you know that obviously the cold water message is being heard loud and clear, and they're coming to our course. Thanks very much.
Yeah, that's a great thing actually. And so I was just sent an email back to Jean early this morning, actually, at about 3:30 while I was getting ready for this. So we've got quite a good response for that. The issue obviously is that for New Zealand it's a time zone thing, and for some of them are saying, could we actually just change it around so it's a little bit more pliable for us to be turning up at those times. So I'm gonna get in touch with Gordon, just see whether we can actually get some stuff where the Kiwis might be able to get in at maybe 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and we'll just see how that actually rolls through. But yep, there's going to be a big take up of that cold water boot camp. And again, Port Credit, we sat around a table there, and Jean was there as well. I think you were as well, Ted, where we talked about bringing Gord and Ian out to New Zealand and running some of those cold water camps. They were actually set up and ready to go for early 2020. And obviously we got hijacked again by COVID. So yeah, damn COVID. It's just so frustrating, I think. But hey, that's where we're at.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Baz. It was a great presentation.
Thank you, Baz. Appreciate it. I always enjoy your presentations, and I've preempted the MC because the MC is up next. And thank you, Ted, for emceeing, but now you're on. So the last segment of our program today it's about the Safe Boating Council, and we have lots of tools to provide and support our boating stakeholders and safety stakeholders in this endeavor of welcoming new boaters. How can we help? Ted didn't get introduced this morning, so he's asked me to keep this a bit briefer, but just so you're aware, Ted is actually the founder of Play Safe Productions, who are one of the key producers today. But in addition to producing and hosting a variety of TV and boating and aviation series, because Ted's not only a boater, but he's a pilot and has some great planes. Publishing numerous marine magazines, Ted has also focused, lost my place, some of his attention to safety, created and delivered well over 100 major safety projects on boating and aviation, general water safety, and even building ice roads in the far north. The delivery mechanisms range from national television broadcast, direct delivery workshops, and internet. Over the past 15 years, Ted has been responsible for creating and delivering CSBC's innovative boating safety outreach programs on a wide variety of subjects targeted to every segment of the recreational boating market. And just on a side personal note, when I became chair 2.5 years ago, I didn't realize that I also inherit Ted. and that's been a great relationship. So ladies and gentlemen, Ted Rankin to deliver the final segment on the Canadian Safe Boating Council and what we can do to help. Ted?
Thanks, Joe. So it's been a very interesting symposium. I've learned an awful lot of insights, and many of you know me, some of you don't. So in the Alcoholics Anonymous or any other addiction groups meeting spirit, my name is Ted and I'm a boater. And like all of you, at one time I was a new boater. But in my case, I was a new boater, at least a new style boater, quite a few times. And I think Baz said, in terms of people are moving from one boating style to another and they're continuing to be new boaters. I want to give you a bit of an idea of basically my new boater background. Now, although I started my time on the water, like most kids, boating and fishing with my father. So I'm a generational boater. Just check out that life jacket. Wasn't too long into my teen years before my thoughts turned from boating to, well, other than girls or thoughts about being below the surface, I became a new diver, a scuba instructor. So also check out that fashionable life jacket there, Inflatable. We were way ahead of our time back then. Before I turned 20, my thoughts turned skyward. And yep, I became a new pilot. And no, I didn't start flying with fashionable parachutes until I started flying aerobatics. But in my early 30s, I started to set my sights on the water, and I did start boating like so many new boaters we're seeing today. I purchased a used 16-foot Hobie Cat, and using a book I got with the boat, I taught myself how to sail. I mean, how hard could it possibly be? I mean, it's only a sailboat. There's no internet, no explanations or drawings. And you know what? I was sheeting my jib in on the wrong side of the mast for about 2 weeks before I discovered that. And the book didn't really cover it. The diagrams are not really good. And it wasn't long after that I really started to sail that boat well. I started to race. So I became a new Hobie Cat racer, all new sets of learning. But family, work, flying started to get in the way. So the boating was certainly put on the back, but I managed to stay boating a little bit. Back then I was a new float plane pilot where they didn't teach you very much, but I stayed close to the water. And what I learned, of course, the difference in flying versus my sailing was errors in flying can be pretty swift and sure. But the boat allowed me to stay as close to the water as I could. Now, what's interesting, although I've been separated from the show for a long time, most of you or some of you know me from Powerboat Television, and I started the TV show in a number of magazines, and that ran for, I was with them for probably 20 years, and then it's continued on, which is great. We were on some amazing networks, and again, it's been 15 years since I've been involved with the show, so I can let you in a little secret. I was a new boater. I started the show on powerboating. I was not a powerboater. I didn't even own a powerboater. And I got to tell you, learning how to boat as a new boater on national TV is pretty tough stuff. But I had lots of folks to be able to support me. You might recognize some of those faces. They made sure I didn't get myself into trouble or didn't say anything incorrect. And trial by fire, I learned to boat pretty well. And they worked to make sure that what the audience saw was a competent and capable and knowledgeable and safe me. Now, between the show and the magazines, I spent over 100 days on the water every single year. And I also vacationed on the water. So when you work and play that kind, you become an experienced boater pretty fast. So where am I now? To Baz's point, I'm a new boater. That's my fleet now. I have a kayak, a canoe, and a stand-up paddleboard. Basically, I'm learning how to boat all over again. And a special note, I did purchase another Hobie Cat. And this is a picture my wife Helga posted on Facebook. It always makes me laugh. I'm reading the instruction book. Yep, new boat, old book, old style. So I wanted to give you an idea of the fact that with PlaySafe Productions, I've got a lot of new boater experience, a lot of new experience. I understand that market. So do my folks that work with me, which is important. And that's how the genesis of a lot of these programs started. And I'm going to review some of these programs because I think that they're going to be of value to you as you go out and promote boating safety to those new boaters. I normally start out these videos or these presentations, of course, with a lot of humor and things like that. And instead, I just started out self-serving to give you an idea of basically what kind of a new everything that I was, but I just couldn't resist this video clip. This is, I'm going to take it as Shuswap Lake. And yep.
You see, this fucking doesn't want to bother. There you go, boys. It's doable. Who would have ever thought?
That's right. That guy's driving his boat with his trailer still attached. That's taking the best of sort of like a launch ramp bloopers with boating bloopers. Now, what I want to wait to see is I want to see, of course, most boats are towable or car toppable. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see this guy make a mistake. Now that would be an interesting video. And I just couldn't resist at least showing you some people will put any kind of boat that they can on their car topper. Maybe we'll see one of these guys do the launch for next year's symposium. I would like to start off the presentation with, we're going to bring back Sergeant Aaron Busby from the York Regional Marine Police Unit that's going to talk a little bit about the things that he does and he's been doing to be able to engage new boaters.
I think education is something that can always be increased, but I think that it is the incumbent upon us collectively within the marine industry, whether that be Transport Canada, whether that be the Canadian Safe Boating Council, whether that be the police and the emergency responders that actually are out here. I think education is something that collectively we can assist these new boaters. We want to see the new boaters. We want them to be able to enjoy our lakes, but we want them to do it safely. I think that education is key. Education is key not only to drive home the obvious, don't drink and boat, wear your PFD, that type of thing. But I think it's very important for these people to know your location before the emergency happens. You don't want to try to learn how to use your smartphone in the case of an emergency, even if you end up in the water, to make sure that it's in a waterproof container. These things will save your life, and they are common. So these occurrences, these aren't a one-off. These happens all the time. We had another occurrence last year, the exact same thing, where a boat actually overturned. People floated in the water for nearly an hour before they were able to access a cell phone, and the same thing. They didn't know their location. But education it goes so much further than that. It goes to the fact that instead of just having things online, let's have a mentorship. Let's have some sort of way to get to the community. Here at York Regional Police, we go and we engage the community. Everything we do, we have them on land. We have their captivated audience out wherever they anchor. We get off our boats with jet skis. We go over. I was explaining earlier. There's one location where everyone goes there to moor for the day. There isn't a boat there now that doesn't have a floaty that says York Regional Police or a whistle. They want to comply. They comply because they know us, not because it's the law, but it's because they know us and it's the right thing to do.
So that was an indication, or to give you an idea of what Aaron was doing, certainly on a local basis. And we dive into the presentation, and I'm going to review some of the products that we have available for you to use. Dave, I've lost my speaker's notes, so we're going to talk first about a Start Boating program. And Start Boating it's a dynamic video-based learning platform providing safe boating information. It was produced by the Life Saving Society in partnership with the CSBC, and it's aimed at new boaters, both generational and new Canadians, targeting those who operate small boats. My goodness, sorry about that. This has skipped ahead a bit. So maybe they'll take away my hosting job too. So why small boats? Well, everyone in this call will know, but just to refresh, this is the informational chart from the Life Saving Society's last 5-year drowning research report. Takes us up to 2018, which is where the information known has been reported. Small powered vessels under 20 feet and canoes represent 50% of all drowning fatalities. By the way, there's some good news in that. This period is down 5%, this period that they've indicated, from 55 from 5 years ago. Canoes as a standalone are huge in percentage of drowning. Along with kayaks and inflatable boats, the drownings total 34%. Which is about 25% more than small power boats. So these are basically the boats that we are targeting at. Now, this report doesn't take into account COVID or the effects of COVID. I mean, it only takes us to 2018, and I'm sure that those numbers are going to be dramatically increased. And this is what I call the COVID circumstance, promoting small boat sales. These are the things that new Canadians and generational Canadians are seeing. It's giving them an opportunity to get out on the water for like $400. No license, no permit or education needed. The vessels represent entry-level craft for those new to boating and also those new to Canada who want to try boating. So let's talk about new to Canada. Stats Canada projections project that foreign-born new Canadians currently represent 21% of the Canadian population. That was when the study was done a few years ago. That's expected to rise to between 25 to 28% of the nation's population by 2031. That's whopping quarter of all Canadians will be foreign born. This is huge, and it's getting huger. I know that's probably not a word, but it's getting bigger. Now, for that many, or should I say most, recreational boating will not be that familiar. I mean, even water activities, water recreation is certainly not that familiar. And based on a life-saving study, these new Canadians are preparing to get out onto the water, and many are already there. So the recreational survey of new Canadians, 79% of new Canadians plan to be in and around the water during the summer months, and 31 plan to participate in boating activities. And this study was about 5 years old. Subsequent life-saving studies also found that immigrant tweens, these are kids aged 11 to 14, are 5 times more likely to be unable to swim than their peers. And that 93% of those non-swimmers said they plan to participate in water activities. So we are seeing new Canadians getting out on the water than ever before, and that was even before COVID. So what we did is we developed a program in 6 languages, and through Stats Canada information, we learned what were the most dominant languages that we would focus in on. So Mandarin, Cantonese, Hindi, which basically covers most South Asian countries, and Tagalog, which is the Philippines. It's also available, obviously, in English and French, but those are the 6 languages that were making the program available. And when we talked about small boats, Start Boating focuses on 4 entry-level boats: kayak, canoe, and stand-up paddle boards. Now, none of these requires a license and education, with the exception of small open boats, which we've included this as well. But you do require proof of competency, but you can never learn enough. And our interactive online program, which is what Start Boating is a great primer before someone purchases, and is a great reminder after they purchased, and also a fun information experience for the rest of the family. The basic core of the program is a story of a family out enjoying a perfect day on the water, 7 minutes long, and celebrates family values, the joy of boating, demonstrations of safe boating, but not overt, of best boating practices, and some tension to add a little level of drama. Each of the stories is about 7 minutes long, and as the story unfolds, these icons that you're seeing on the screen pop up. They represent an informational module, and on each of the types of boats, so stand-up paddleboard, kayak, canoe, and small open motorboat, there's about 20 of these icons that pop up. The person watching the program can pause it, can learn a little bit more information about what best practices are being shown, and then have an opportunity to be able to return to the story. Or during certain breaks in the show, all the icons pop up for additional learning, as well as at the end of the program itself. So essentially what the icon does is it focuses in on the informational safety behaviors or safety practices that are referred to in the main story in much more depth. And it provides tips and techniques and a variety of other information. It's not just all safety. Someone was talking earlier about skills and things like that. We need to teach people to operate their boat. Now, we can't do it virtually, but this program does certainly to a certain degree. We launched with lots of fanfare and promotion, billboards, street level signs, promotion with over 100 million impressions. We were in Canadian welcome centers in all of the languages, and leverage partnership communication as much as we possibly can. And the list goes on. It's a great product, and a lot of folks are already using it. We've had it out for about 3 years now, and it's perfectly positioned to deal with these new boaters, especially in the categories that don't require the education. So that takes care of Start Boating. We'd like to move on to Better Boater. And I think Rick had put up a couple of our handouts that we make available through our Better Boater program. So basically, the Better Boater project is being implemented to engage and educate a large boater community, primarily within the proven higher risk use vessels. Again, focusing on small open power boats and human powered craft. Those demonstrated to be not only big in population, but big in incidents. And in particular, we're focusing on younger Canadian boaters, especially the new boater. So messaging through a mix of better boating tips and boating safety information. It's a strong boating safety culture is being developed within that target audience. Our messages are being delivered through national ad campaigns, social media, website, YouTube. So a variety of ways to be able to engage the audience with interactive and interesting messaging, promoting not just safety, but also skills development as well. The first campaign was launched in May as the boating season started. It was designed as kind of a mini game following a TV game show format with our host Boat and Bill asking a series of questions to test boating knowledge of the participant. Participant has the option to answer, choose an answer, and then once they've selected their answer, a short video would explain whether they were correct or incorrect. We're focused on Facebook and Instagram as our main platforms to target the audience. Started with general boating safety messaging, with posts focusing on CSBC's 5 key safety messages, and we're a variety of mix of images and videos. We introduced this summer the Boating Q&As, EHS, Celebrating Canada. It's a series where we're answering questions that have actually come in from our audience. So we are getting responses from our audience. They're asking questions, and we're providing answers to those individual questions interactively and online. A new feature for the upcoming boating season is asking boaters that have been asking us questions that we're communicating to be able to share their stories, to be able to provide real boater insights to others. So making the platform interactive, informative, and through engagement and promotion of that interaction with the audience. We've done a number of theme posts designed of like a series of multiple posts that allows better boater to expand on the information that's being provided, promotes interaction and engagement. Website information is divided into 7 main areas, 4 key topic areas that you can read. The topics divided: safety tips, general boating tips, boating techniques. Each key topic landing page is designed for quick accessibility to the information contained therein. Downloadable reference materials related to the topics are found in the top carousel, and the boating information is grouped by subject. Also on the website, a variety of educational videos. And although we're targeting this information to the end user, we are encouraging, obviously, use by our stakeholders and other boating safety outreach folks to be able to access this information. But by theming it, it makes it easier to find stuff related to specific subjects and topics. We also have got a lot of downloadable reference material, collection of informative PFDs you can download and share. The images as well from the boating Q&As are also shareable for downloading. And we pumped it out, all this stuff with a national ad campaign. I've talked about our online work and things like that, but we also are putting it out through Pattison Billboard campaign, which is really quite effective. And social media, infographics, videos, reference material will start for boating topics that haven't been suggested. And our followers, we're engaging followers in our online community. So it's a really good theme. The Better Boater is a really good theme. We are getting that engagement. We're delivering the information, and that engagement is really making a difference in being able to effectively deliver the messages. Next up, BOSS and RTF. Don't you just love acronyms, BOSS? So boating safety that speaks. We of course extended the BSS, which just sounds wrong, BOSS, and RTF, research that floats. And I spoke a little bit with those of you that are coming into the green room before the session. I was talking about some of the stuff that we're doing for research that floats, and I'll be able to expand on it a little bit. So boating safety that speaks. We tagged it as Enjoy Boating. Again, embracing the idea that safety doesn't need to be like horrible stuff. I mean, we just basically are promoting safe and responsible boating to help people enjoy their boating. And so that's actually the platform in which is the central repository. If you are interested in getting more information beyond what we normally just deliver through our advertising, whether it be social media or more traditional billboards. So we're enhancing boater education using some innovation. And what we're doing is we're using augmented reality to be able to reel people in, to be able to get people to interact with it. And our focus is on teaching preparation, prevention, and looking at through outreach, increasing folks' adoption rates to the safety programming that we're actually promoting. This is a typical poster that we would have at marinas. It's part of the Patterson campaign, et cetera. And you can see the QR code. And when you scan the posters or postcards or the magazine ads with your phone, the image comes alive with interactive material and video messaging and other options for the user to click through for additional information. Of course, it's national in both official languages. If you, in this case, can you spot the danger? If you scan on the, if they scan on the QR code with your phone, the augmented reality will show you the danger, which is right there in your face, that you simply can't see within that backscatter. So that's the kind of interactive things that we get involved with. And then once we've engaged the boater with their phone, then we provide them an opportunity to be able to actually download an app free of charge that gives them access to all kinds of interactive scenarios on collision avoidance, night boating, boating sober, etc. As we continue to build that library, the app continues to grow. This gives you an idea of a couple of screenshots from avoiding collisions, where we give tips on how to avoid a collision. I mean, we don't just teach rules of the road. What we're doing is basically saying, how can you tell if you're on an intersecting course with someone, and making that experience interactive. The videos are tips focused, and they augment the interactive portion of the app. With each subject has a tips video that's available for the users to view and take their learning experience even further. Research, we've had an opportunity to do some research of the campaign components, and research both pre and post is very strong. So what's happening is we are identifying opportunities to be able to promote, and opportunities of how to promote, and then gauging that response afterwards. So research is a very important part of all of our projects, and in BOSS in particular. Our outreach continues. Obviously, it's changed a bit as far as COVID is concerned. Very social media focused, and we're back in full force as we've got sort of the COVID on the run, with a lot more of our out of home campaigns, and also engaging the marine partners. We're talking in the session about the opportunity of having an engagement for similar kind of programming across the country. What we're looking at doing is making posters and information like this available through marine agencies to be able to put basically at their places of business. Just talking a little bit more on research, and the reason I'm talking on that is we are focusing right now on a life jacket campaign for next year. And we're just in the process right now of developing some new concepts and some new ideas to be able to promote and to be able to create a strong life jacket campaign that we're going to roll out early next year. Dave, what we're going to do is, because we are running a little short, I'm just going to keep going if you don't mind. This is you're sitting there with your finger on the button, push it.
All right, who's not buckled up?
So Dave couldn't resist doing something that relates back to his guys. We basically are looking at reasons people don't wear their life jacket. We call them excuses. The excuse that was in development, the bubbles would come over their head, and interactively you'll be able to choose the excuse of why you're not wearing your life jacket. When I talked about research, this is something that we've just recently done, which I think is pretty darn cool. Research that floats. So Vern, you might be interested in this. What we've been doing is we've been taking a look at what life jacket wear is on boats in inland lakes. So we basically targeted southern and central Ontario. I mean, we don't necessarily have obviously a all of the lakes are exclusive in the country, but we have access to aircraft for free, which is important. And essentially what we do is we are taking a look at what the life jacket wear is from an aerial observation. So not standing on shore with binoculars and watching, but basically taking a look from the air at what life jacket wear behavior is. Here's a couple of typical shots. So we intercept on a mission, let's see, per area, about 2,000 boaters on each mission. So a mission would be a long weekend generally. And this gives you an idea of what our interceptions look like. And from this data, we then can identify, and we're not as, by the way, we've pulled these out a bit and blurred them a little bit. So you know, for privacy and whatever, but you can see what boater life jacket behavior is in situ. So not at a marina, not at a launch ramp, but basically in the middle of a lake, and check out what that behavior is like. So it gives you an idea that we've got a pretty good idea. By the way, that's a shot of Dave's boat on the left. So that's why we are showing faces. That was some of our practice shots, but this way it provides a quick overflight. We get an idea of basically what that image is going to demonstrate to us for life jacket wear, and then we record that data later. Our locations, Lake Nipissing, the northern Muskoka lakes, like Simcoe, like Couchiching, and the Kawartha lakes. And we break down a lake. So for example, in Lake Simcoe, we'll break it down into 4 regions and take a look, seeing if the behavior is different in open lakes or in certain bay areas. We also break it down between activities, if you're fishing, if you're tubing, etc. So partnering up, CPS, ECP. So in addition to aerial overflights, we also will be doing intercept studies next year, because we're going to launch our life jacket campaign in a local market, and we're going to find out exactly what the behavior has been for the wear. And so we're going to talk to people and say, did you see our messaging? Has it changed your behavior, etc.? And we work with a number of students out of Nipissing University in partnership with CPS ECP that will be helping us with that on the water. We didn't get our intercept studies done this year. We were hoping to. Unfortunately, COVID foiled those plans, but we will be going ahead with them next year, which is truly our value year. Safety First Marine. This is an existing product. Many of you are aware of it. So what Safety First Marine is, it's more than just safety equipment. What this is, it's an online course designed for boating, retail, sales staff. Safety is an important component of boating. We've identified that. It can also be a profit center for a marina or a marine retail area if the sales staff is trained properly. And I'm not using the word profit like it's a bad thing. I'm using the word profit that a marine outfitter, a marine retailer, it's their job to make sure that the boater carries the legally required safety equipment. And this program helps identify maybe new staff or existing staff about what does that mean for what boat. Because if the boater is out on the water without that, the fines could be up to $200. This is what the program looks like. So this is the dashboard. You can see legally required safety equipment part 1, legally required safety equipment part 2, depends on kind of vessels. Some of the stuff is colored, some of the stuff's not. The stuff that's not colored is that dash, or the stuff that, pardon me, is not colored means you've actually done that module. Everything's broken into modules. It's all interactive. There's a variety of interactive tests that happen. And then basically, as you continue to go through the dashboard, you end up highlighting, or pardon me, in this case, turning them black and white, so you know you've accomplished that, so you can track your progress all the way through. Vessel-specific equipment, safety equipment, because it's not necessary for all boats, depending obviously size, type, whatever. Also good to have aboard. And we also include in the course important information: licensing, loading, float plans, courses beyond pleasure craft operator card, so make sure you get that. So we make sure we cover all the bases to be able to answer all of the customers' questions. We also work hard with the instructional programs in videos to be able to take you to a point of view. In this case, you want to see how an inflatable life jacket works? Let's go underwater and watch how it works. So you, as the marine retail sales guy, can really explain it to the customer. Graphics, obviously, part of the program. And at the end, once you have successfully gone through all of the modules and they're all black and white rather than color, and you've gone through all of our interactive testing, you get a certificate of completion. This is perfect for new staff. This is perfect to refresh staffs. And it's the kind of thing I said that really makes a difference from customer satisfaction. Downloadable resources, which the marine or retailer can actually hand out, and custom made. So you can end up having minimum safety equipment, for example, and you select your boat, and that's how you get your downloadable resource. In addition, we've got a sales app. So we actually put the information right into the retail sales associate's hand. And although that gives them a nice little prompt, which is really good to have, but what it really gives them is an ability to turn that phone, their smartphone, to the customer to show exactly what a flare looks like, each type of flare, or show you exactly how an anchor works in a certain bottom. So it actually is not just a prompt for the sales associate, it also is a great visual demonstration of how stuff works for the customer. Weather to boat, long awaited. This was something we've been working on for a year. We launched it this spring. So Weather to Boat is our new weather app. We partnered up with the folks at Environment and Climate Change Canada and developed with their data an app that provides not just marine weather, but it also provides city weather as well and tells you what you're looking at. Look, boaters tend to, and I'm talking new boaters and experienced boaters as well, and I'm kind of guilty. Do I really go to Environment Climate Change Canada to go look at marine weather? Yeah, I just go to the Weather Network. But what a lot of boaters don't realize is what you're getting at the Weather Network, of course, is city weather and boating weather. So I get to see what the Keswick weather is like, but what's happening on the water in Keswick is different than what I'm reading on city weather. So that way, we basically are delivering everywhere we can a marine forecast or existing marine weather, but we also can deliver city weather as well. And it's not just weather, it's all kinds of stuff. So that gives you a pretty good idea of basically what the Weather to Boat app is. It provides lots of information that's going to help the user, your boater, enjoy their boating experience even more. And I can't say this enough, it's free. It gives you an idea what the navigation menu looks like. And of course, you basically are logging in, and what we give you an opportunity to do is something which is, I believe, which is really, really unique. It provides you with a series of downloadable, of accessible resources that once you put in your boat size and information, it actually streamlines the information to your boat type and size as far as pre-departure checklists, as far as emergency equipment, etc. Continuous information safety messages are popping up. You know how you get those like horrible things to say on Facebook and whatever, all these messages pop up. We're not really that bad or that abusive, but we are continually putting reminders about safe boating practices on this app. That basically is sort of our cost for their use of it, and is providing that providing those messages for them on a constant basis. Every time that they use the program, it's there, and we're continuing to promote safety programming. I talked about city weather. And it's basically giving the information about what you find in the city. You can see that throughout, all kinds of reminders about safe boating practices, opportunity to be able to access the information, all kinds of boating tips and videos. So the moment you actually click on stuff, you are receiving a variety of interactive information. Marine forecast and conditions. This information comes through our partnership with Environment and Climate Change Canada, as does our city weather. So as you can see on the top toolbar, it says City Marine. You can actually slight between the other. If a marine forecast exists, you can get it. If not, it tells you that you're getting city weather. All kinds of warnings and alerts when you're out on the water. Pre-departure checklist specific to your boat. Like I mentioned, essentially you can break it down to whatever boat that you're operating, and your pre-departure checklist or your safety equipment or things like that relate to your boat. Interactive trip plan with emergency contact alerting. So we as boating safety educators keep telling people to file float plans and download this little form, write it out or whatever, make it on your, make one and then give it to a responsible person. A lot of work involved. What we've done is we've actually streamlined this process. So essentially using the phone, using the app, you simply put a lot of your sort of tombstone information in. So basically your type of boat and all that basic information that you don't want to put in over and over again. So you basically lock that in, and then you identify emergency contacts that you would like and put their contact information in. And then you simply start to then inform those emergency contacts about a trip. So essentially what happens is you fill the information out, and your emergency contact you've identified will receive notification that you are heading out. And it'll let them know that if there's any reason that they're overdue, that the emergency contact will be notified with instructions about what to do, who to call, when to call, etc. So it takes kind of like the guesswork out. Biggest problem, Ted goes out boating. My wife says, well, you know, he's always late. He's going to miss supper. And so essentially what happens, and this is kind of in people's minds, I hate to sort of call, I hate to be able to call search and rescue if he's overdue. I'll just wait till, you know, after Jeopardy, I'll just wait till maybe bedtime. And then all of a sudden I'm not there. By the time we're talking to search and rescue, by the time people make the calls, it's like too late, it's dark. And unless the person knows details about your type of boat and what color it is and things like that, search and rescue are a bit disadvantaged. This takes care of all of that. And not only alerts your emergency contact, but encourages them to actually make that call. You as the user, or me as the person that's out boating and forget to call in, I receive notifications 15, 10, and 5 minutes before my return time saying, hey, it's time to alert your emergency contact so that they don't call search and rescue. And then there's one final push notification 15 minutes before the report time. So the idea being is that you've got to report in time, like basically an overdue time of 1 hour, which is like our standard. And you get one final push notification saying, we're going to have to tell your emergency contact to be able to make that call. Another thing on the map, and Rick, I know you guys are putting an app together with all of your users. We've got we've reached out and basically developed our own database across the country of marinas, launch ramps, etc. Put as much detail as we possibly could in the app of each of the marinas. So through telephone outreach, through web, through media search, things like that, we've put together a as complete as possible marina list and launch ramp list across the entire country. We've alerted the marinas that they're on there, and now they can come in and actually change their data if they would like. And they are, which is great, because there's nothing a boater wants more than learning where to launch their boat before they go, or where they can pop in once they're on the water for fuel or something to eat or whatever. So in addition to the marinas, we've also got information on launch ramps, all built into the program. The information about, obviously there's a full website in addition to the app, can be found at weathertoboat.ca. We provide tips on how to use the app, learning how to use the trip plan. So we give lots of customer support on how to actually use the product, although it's pretty intuitive. I mean, even I can use it. So if I can use it, anybody can use it. And we're effectively and aggressively going out and promoting Weather to Boat through social media posts, through advertising, with the few magazines that are still standing, working a partnership with marinas, because it's a two-way street. We're promoting them, so hopefully they're promoting us. And so we're working hard to be able to get engagement as far as the Weather to Boat app is concerned. Pushing hard for this boating season coming up. This boating season is 2022, heavily with posters, handouts, working with the boat shows to be able to promote the app. Again, I keep saying it's free. And we are always updating our information on with tips and information, fall boating, night boating, etc. And we'll continue to leverage all of our safety partners for promotion of the app. So that in a whirlwind presentation is how the CSBC are working to help you, the marine industry, the safety constituents, the safety stakeholders, you help new boaters. And to learn more about any of our programs, copy down Cheryl's address. Geez, I wonder who removed mine. Copy. Cheryl is, if you would just make a note, if you'd like to learn anything more, although all of the websites are there, please just give us a shout and we're happy to provide what we can, help you engage with us so you can engage with your constituents as well. And I'm only a few minutes over.
Hey, you did good, Ted.
I'm tired. So I think that's given a pretty good idea of kind of what we're doing and what we've been doing. And Joe, I'm looking for my notes here, and
I'm up next, Ted. So
yeah.
While you continue to look,
yeah,
I've got the first wrap-up announcement, and really it's just we've got a great mix of people with us today. As we mentioned sort of at the beginning, Ted, we've got people from the states, Army Corps of Engineer, National Safe Boating Council. We got New Zealand here. We got Transport Canada here. We got Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons here. Life Saving. We've got a mix of folks from every corner of boating safety, and the Canadian Safe Boating Council is exactly as it's described. It's Canadian, and it's a safe boating council, and it's a forum of partner organizations simply to promote safe and responsible boating. I think you've gotten a good flavor for us of us today, and of course we're a volunteer board, and the group that we work with are hardworking people. Everybody has a responsibility, and they're always looking for people to assist them. So if you're interested, please contact us. I know there's a whole lot of stuff at the bottom, but simply if you want to become a member, that helps us. And if your organization or company wants to become a member, we have group memberships also. But then if you want to just talk about the CSBC, just go to csbc.ca and you'll be able to find us. One of the really simple ways of finding us is email chair@csbc.ca. That's not a hard one to remember. It'll come to me, and I'll direct accordingly, or we'll engage in a conversation. So next slide, please.
I think this is
that's you.
It's over to me.
Yes.
But before I dive into this, I would like to make a mention that all of you who attended will receive a survey in the mail in about a week. It'll come from the Survey Monkey, Survey Chimp, whatever the organization is that does this kind of work for us. Please, when you get it, please fill it out and get it back to us. It'll help us. It'll help us with a lot of our programs, and it'll help make our symposiums to be more responsive to your needs. Cold water workshops. As you know, CSBC did cold water boot camp, beyond cold water boot camp, which were essentially linear one-way education programs. We started a cold water workshops in person recently, and instructor workshops. We now have got the virtual cold water workshops happening. We've got one coming in October, one coming in November. You just check out the site, csbc.ca, go to events, cold water workshops. If you'd like more information, you would like to register for one of these virtual workshops, Professor Popsicle, Dr. Gord Giesbrecht, is the host and the instructor on these, and it's very instructional. Not only providing good information about your own cold water awareness and enhancing that, it's also providing you information about how to convey cold water messaging to others, and equally as important, be able to actually deal and save those that are suffering from cold water immersion, suffering from hypothermia. So it's a great little package. It runs over 2 nights. Check it out. I mentioned to Baz, we had 7 Kiwis on our program the night before last and last night. So we're getting good engagement. Weather to Boat app. I think I pounded that enough. I encourage everyone in this room to download the app, and encourage everyone that they know who boats to download the app. You know, how do things get sold? How do things happen? A friend tells a friend tells a friend. Remember that old shampoo commercial? I told 2 friends and they told 2 friends. So help get the word out. This is a great program and it's free. There's a lot of power in that one app, an incredible amount of power and information that'll help new boaters and help you.
Excellent.
And I think we're going to talk about sponsors next.
Yes, that's me. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Stearns. It says that the life jacket experts, but they've been trusted on the water since 1952. And Stearns is our presenting sponsor here, and you've seen the logo throughout. You'll see the logo on our website because they have been tremendous support to us. And I mentioned earlier about the PFDs that they are sending up north. And I got to tell you, if you've not seen any of that footage of the young folks and the families receiving PFDs up there, it's exciting. It almost brings tears to your eyes because it's so exciting. The kids up there, by the way, think that it becomes normal wear and they wear them all day. But anyways, I'd like to thank Stearns. They're our presenting sponsor here, and I'll soon be talking about the Canadian Safe Boating Awards. They're a presenting sponsor there, plus their ongoing help. So thank you very, very much. Port of Vancouver, thank you. You've supported us 2 years in a row now, and in our virtual world, and that has assisted us in making this presentation even that much better. So thank you, Jason. I don't know that Jason's with us, but we'll certainly make sure that Jason gets thanked. Next. Canadian Safe Boating Awards. I mentioned that a couple times, and we were off in 2021, and so we're really looking. It's going to be held. It's Sunday, January 23rd, 2022 at the National Yacht Club. We're looking for nominations, by the way, for 2 years, 2020 and 2021. Applications are available at under events at csbc.ca. It's not a hard website to remember. Due by October 31st, 2021. Brenda Reeve and her team work hard on this particular event. It's a highlight of the year, and I will tell you, it's one of the events many years ago that I went to, really as a member of CPS ECP, and almost got hooked on what CSBC does at that particular moment. But we've supported the organization for a long time. But this is an event that, you know, nominate someone. There's room to nominate organizations, marinas, etc. Marine professionals, volunteers of boating volunteers of the year, several categories. So please take a look and nominate. Say thanks to someone today by putting in a nomination form. Next slide, which I think it takes us down to well, okay, Ted, you want to take that?
Well, how can we help?
Yeah, pretty straightforward, I guess.
Yep. If
you
you've
know,
got any ideas or comments or input, give us a ring. And actually, so you don't need to put chair at CSBC every single time.
You can put info also.
You'll be busy.
Ted and John McMullen, I think, received these. So, but anyways, we're here. We're here to help. So I think we now go into the last slide. We do. And I've just got a couple comments before, because we're going to finish on this one, because that one's a real place with real people. But I would just like to, on behalf of the Canadian Safe Boating Council, thank our presenters today. A wide range of folks from New Zealand down to the US with Vern. Vern, thank you. It's been great seeing you, because that's the only way I've seen you the last couple of years. To BC through to Quebec, thank you very much. Ted, thank you for stepping in as our MC today. We knew that wouldn't be difficult, and we made that adjustment this morning. John McMullen and Cheryl Gallagher and Alan McPherson for working behind the scenes to ensure the proper flow. And I know Lawrence Jacobs doesn't really get to say anything here today, but Lawrence Jacobs is our CSBC director with his CSBC team that meet monthly and work hard to make this work. So thank you. I've thanked our sponsors, Stearns and Port of Vancouver. Thank you once again. But most important, and I know the numbers are dwindling a bit, but thank you for participating today. Thank you for tuning in. Our hope is that you have experienced a small piece of what your Canadian Safe Boating Council does for you. And I'd hope that, go to that csbc.ca site, because you'll find out a lot. I just had somebody recently went there for their first time, and their reaction was, wow, the amount of information that's available. It's up to us, everybody, to assist in bringing new boaters beyond being new boaters. You saw Julie and Sean and Dolores and Jimmy at the beginning. I personally played a role in helping them become educated boaters and better boaters. But we all have that responsibility. But I sleep at night knowing that I've hopefully had an effect on somebody. My thanks to our partners and the organizations that make up the Canadian Safe Boating Council. We are a dedicated group of people, and I think we do make a better boating world. I look forward now to seeing you at the 2022 Symposium, September 14th to 16th, 2022, Le Westin Resort and Spa, Mont-Tremblant, Quebec. And I know that Lawrence is already working on that with his team. And I think probably next month we'll start ramping up on that immediately. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Ted, do you have anything final? Because we're not far off.
In the words of, is it Elmer Fudd? That's all, folks.
Thank you. You'll get your survey, and what we would appreciate is giving us feedback. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a good day. Enjoy your weekend.